Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Friday, everybody, and you guys know what that means. Friday's in the offseason. We got the Friday free-for-all mailbag today, where we get to answer your guys' questions. We spend all week preparing awesome shows for you guys, and we love when we get to sit down and then answer all of your guys' questions, and that kind of helps us from a planning perspective. But we do love getting to sit down and answer a lot of the questions that you guys have that you kind of build up throughout the week. Now, if this does happen to be your first mailbag, you can always put MB for mailbag or a little mailbox emoji behind your question or comment. That lets us know to set it aside. And as always, super chats will get bumped up to the top. We have 43 awesome questions in there right now. Continue filling some out as the show goes on. But I love these days, Brian. It's the end of the week. It's Friday. Kind of stinks that there's no college football on Saturday, but it's the way life goes. It's the offseason, man.
It is the way that it goes, my man. But we are not in-season people. We do shows year-round. There is no off-season at Irish Breakdown. Even when there's no football to watch that's live, there's plenty for us to do, including answering all of your great questions. And, Trev, as Trev said, if you want to get bumped to the top of the line, you put a super chat in, and we have a super chat now from our guy Tyler Evans.
Appreciate you, Tyler. What do you think of the NFL Hall of Fame class? And a lifelong Carolina Panthers fan, I will be there in Canton.
I get it, and obviously he's going to be in there because Luke Kuechly was announced as a Hall of Famer today, and very deserved, even though he had a shorter career because he retired early. I don't think there's any doubt that Luke Kuechly is a Hall of Fame, a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I believe this was his first year on the ballot. So, look, as far as my opinion on it, I think some of these were no-brainers. I think Luke Kuechly was a no-brainer. I think Drew Brees is a no-brainer. I think Larry Fitzgerald is a no-brainer, and I'm not just saying that because his son just signed with Notre Dame. I would have said that before.
Yeah.
You know, Adam Vinatieri is, to me, for a kicker, a no-brainer. And then I believe the fifth one was it Roger Craig?
Roger Craig, yes, sir.
You know, so the only one that I had sort of any kind of question on would have been Roger Craig. And I think Roger Craig was a very good player in his career. I don't know that I would consider him like a great Hall of Fame caliber player. He only had 3 1,000-yard rushing seasons. He did have 1,000-yard receiving season, but he had a lot of years, Trev, where he was over 1,000 yards of total offense every year. You know, so when you look at like his rookie year, he's 725 rushing, 427 receiving, 649 the next year rushing, 675 receiving. He had 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving in 1885. I think the first time he didn't have 1,000 yards in a season combined was 1990. He had in 11 games. It might have been a strike year. It's one of the strike years, but it could have just been he got hurt. He had 439 rushing yards and then 201 receiving yards. He never went over 1,000 again, and that was in year 9 of his career. I mean, so you're talking about a guy that's got over 8,000 career rushing yards, over almost 5,000 career receiving yards. He had 73 career touchdowns. So, and here's a crazy stat, Trev. As a runner, he only lost 1 fumble in his entire career. He lost twice as many fumbles as a receiver, but in his entire career of a decade, he only lost 3 total fumbles in his career. So he was a really good back, a really, really good back. He also played on some teams where, you know, you had to worry about Dwight Clark early in his career, and then eventually it was, you know, Jerry Rice and Joe Montana. So that'd be the only one that's debatable, but it's like I would spend so little time trying to debate against it. It's like, look, would I have made him, would I have put him in? Probably not. Am I going to argue that he has no business? Absolutely not. He was a heck of a player and, you know, won a bunch of Super Bowls. I mean, he was part of, I think, 3 of the Super Bowl teams for the Niners. He was a part of the first 2, I believe. No, actually, he wasn't. He wasn't on the first one. He was on at least 3 of them. So let me go. He was not on the 81 Super Bowl team. Let me pull this up here. So the Niners won Super Bowls in 81. He was not part of that team. He was on the 84 team. He was on the 88 team, which I remember Excuse me. That was one of the best Super Bowls ever played. And then that was the second one was against the Bengals. And then he was on the 89 Super Bowl team that I remember way too well because that was against the Broncos. So I'm good with him being a Hall of Famer, even though I don't know that I necessarily would have voted for him. I think the bigger story that some people have is who didn't get in. And I just wish that the media would say, let's have that argument tomorrow. Today, let's celebrate the 5 that got in.
Yeah.
And tomorrow we can debate the merits of Bill Belichick and Eli Manning and some of the guys that didn't get in. But I think the 5 that got in are deserving to various degrees of being Hall of Famers. And I think it's a quality class. And it's, for me as an older person, like a guy in his 40s, like these are the guys that I grew up watching, a lot of them. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's always nice to be nostalgic. And then with Luke Kuechly, it stings a little bit because I still will relay the story of when I tried to push Notre Dame to get Luke Kuechly, and that was when I realized nobody at Notre Dame is going to listen to me, so why waste my time on it? And then John Tenuta's message was he doesn't run well enough for us, so they took Dan Fox instead of him. Yeah. Yep. But it's a very, very good Hall of Fame class, Trev. Very good.
Yeah, agreed. I guess I'll plead the fifth on my thoughts of not trying to go after Luke Kuechly too much, but different story for a different day. One thing I will say about Roger Craig too is I think last night during the ceremony they said that he was, and I'll have to go back and look to see if anybody else had done this prior, but he was like the first running back in NFL history to have 1,000 rushing and 1,000 receiving yards in the same season.
Yeah, and he did it way before that was a popular thing, Trev. He did that in 1985. Like that, like Marshall Faulk, I think, has done that. I think didn't LT do that? I thought that Marshall Faulk did that. I could be wrong, but I thought, but yeah, like he was that dual threat guy before that became like a thing. Yeah, Marshall Faulk did it in 1999, and then I think LaDainian Tomlinson did it as well, but I could be wrong on that one. LT, did he do it? Where's his receiving stats? Here we go. All right, LT. LT never did it. So I thought for some reason he did. He never had more than say he had 100 catches one year. That's probably why I thought he did it. But yeah, I'm actually going to look that up. Who's the other one? What running backs have had 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving?
I know Christian McCaffrey did it with the Christian McCaffrey did it with the Panthers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had Roger. It's been done 3 times. The third is by Christian McCaffrey in 19. So it's been done Roger Craig in 85, Marshall Faulk in 99, and then Christian McCaffrey in 2019. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, that's really good. Now, again, they both had over 1,300 yards rushing. He had 1,050. I mean, so again, he was a very good player, but I just think there's a difference in talent. And Christian McCaffrey would be a no ballot, a no doubt about it, first ballot Hall of Famer as well. So yeah, it was fun to actually got to see him play in person a couple times during his Notre Dame career. Yeah, so very talented player. Very talented player.
Yeah, he won comeback player of the year last night after after coming back from an Achilles injury. He had over 2,100 total yards of offense.
That's crazy.
It's just nuts.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Somebody mentioned, like now get Ricky Waters in. I mean, I think you see some things like this. Hopefully can be a start of guys like him getting in. Because sometimes the way voters are, well, like, hey, I can't vote for Ricky Waters because I think Roger Craig should get in first. They'll go with that seniority type of thing. But yeah, it's a good class. No Broncos this year, but hey, it's all good. Nobody's perfect. So yeah. Yep. Good stuff. We had another super chat that just popped up from Guy Allegretto. I think this is Guy. This is my Marine buddy. So I think that's who this is. I could be wrong, but yeah. Here you go, Trev.
Appreciate you, Guy. Always enjoy this top shelf duo. Best information on Notre Dame football.
Appreciate you very, very much, buddy. Very much.
From Josh Buffo, the motivational business banker, in your opinion, what game do you think Notre Dame will take the #1 spot, and how long do they hold on to it for? all the way to the Natty or drop from number one, then go on a run to the title? Thank you both.
Honestly, Josh, I don't have an answer on that just yet. I'd have to look at some schedules. Obviously, I think one of Texas or Ohio State could fall behind them in week, 2 or 3? But I'd have to look at some schedules. I expect Notre Dame in the preseason rankings to be 4th to 6th, one of those 3 spots. So they're not going to climb up in the first 2 months unless everybody else loses. And honestly, they shouldn't. If Georgia's undefeated, if Texas is undefeated, or Ohio State's undefeated, there's a couple teams that have really good schedules, then Notre Dame shouldn't pass them if they're also undefeated. When you look at Notre Dame's schedule the first month and a half in the season, you start getting into that November schedule, then you could say, okay, they beat BYU, they beat Miami, they beat SMU, then maybe they could jump some people if those teams are also still really good. But like, let's say Miami's undefeated coming into the Notre Dame game. Shouldn't Miami be ranked ahead of Notre Dame? I think they should. Based on the fact that they're the defending national runners-up and their schedule's a little bit more challenging in certain spots than what Notre Dame's is. Notre Dame's schedule is the complete opposite in 2026 as it was in 2025, Trev. Where last year, and same thing in 2024, where it ended up being their 2 best opponents were both in September, or Power 4 opponents were both in September. And with Texas A&M and Louisville, and then the same thing this year, their 2 best opponents were week 1 and week 3, and the games 1 and game 2. So next year's different. I would argue that their 4 toughest opponents are played within the last 6 games of the season. BYU, Navy, Miami, and SMU. So I don't know, but let's say week 9 randomly. And if they get to number 1, I think they stay number 1 unless there's an undefeated Power 4 champ. So, and then they'll be number 1 at the end of the year. So, the only one I care about is the one at the end of the year.
Well, Josh, if they were going off of the odds that our friends over at FanDuel had, they should be starting the season at number 1. But I'm with Brian. I don't think that they do that. And then I also agree if especially depending on the conference, because there's a world where, a Texas Tech could go undefeated, but if they don't get the respect in the rankings, similar to what happened this past year, I could see them not passing Notre Dame if Notre Dame's also undefeated. But if one of the Big Ten or SEC conference champion winners is 13-0 by the end of it, I think that Notre Dame would get bumped down, even if they were number 1 going into championship weekend. So I'm with you.
And I don't know that I necessarily would disagree with that.
Oh, same. Yeah.
I mean, of course, there's always caveats. I mean, if a team has a schedule like if Notre Dame was number 1 this year, let's say Notre Dame beat Miami and A&M, and they were number 1, and Indiana goes in and beats Ohio State in the Big Ten title game, I wouldn't have bumped Indiana ahead of Notre Dame. I don't think their schedule would have been strong enough to do so. This year, I think their schedule will be strong enough to where you could make more of a case that a 13-0 Indiana would have an ability to jump over Notre Dame based on what we know of the teams they're going to play. But, of course, in 2024, if you look at Indiana's schedule at the end of the year, you're like, dude, what a weak schedule. They played Ohio State and Michigan, and that's it. Yeah, but they did play the 2 teams that played for the title the year before. That's why I always say you don't know if a schedule is going to be hard or soft in the offseason. In today's era, you don't know. Everybody talks about how Indiana's 2024 schedule was super soft, and it turned out to be so, Trev. But I'll repeat, the 2 teams that played for the national title 8 months before the season started were on their schedule. It just so happened that they both stunk. That's why I say you don't know. You don't know how good teams are going to be. Notre Dame in 2024, it was playing a team that the year before went 13-1 and got screwed out of the playoffs, and they ended up being arguably the worst team they played all year. I would actually say they were the worst team they played all year. So you really don't know. You really don't know, Trev. But I think once they get to number 1, it'll be tough to knock them off unless it's, like I said, it's an undefeated team. Like a 12-1 Georgia team that beats Bama or beats Texas in the SEC title game shouldn't jump an undefeated Notre Dame team. Same with if the other way around, Texas or whatever.
Another super chat from Guy Allegretto. Appreciate you. Yes, I am your United States Marine U.S. Corps buddy. At Quezon during the 77-day siege, Coach D is the most knowledgeable of all Notre Dame sites.
I think I told Guy this because Guy sent me. I have a statue over there of the Marines. I think it's the Marines at the Iwo Jima putting the flag up. He sent me that, and he sent me a. I think it's back there, but I have he sent me a Marine hat, which I greatly appreciate, Guy. But actually, Trev, it's interesting. I think I've told Guy this, but I actually wrote a final paper in college. One of my things I needed to do to graduate was on the Tet Offensive, which is what the Siege of Quezon was around, and it was the Tet. It's a Tet holiday, and usually, your enemy takes the holidays off. They did not. They launched a surprise attack in Quezon, and it ended up being a very dominant American military victory, but it was a very terrible PR loss, and then that's the way that the American media portrayed that battle. It seemed as though it was a loss, and that was the thing that ultimately led to them, quote unquote, losing the war, which I will say the United States military did absolutely not lose the Vietnam War. They dominated the Viet Cong in that war, never lost a major battle. What would happen is every time they'd start to take over, the Viet Cong would be like, let's talk. And then they would use that peacetime to get dug back in. And then the Marines and the Army, they'd have to go back in there, and Navy, and get them out again. They won every major battle, but they lost it. They lost it politically. And, you could argue maybe it was a war we never should have fought in. But if you're going to let the troops fight, you let them go fight, and you let them win. And then you figure out what you're going to do afterwards. And our politicians have a very, very, very terrible way of using our military. Once you decide war should always be your last resort. But once you commit to fighting, as the great Wyatt Earp said, get to fighting or get out. You know what I mean? And you let them do their thing. And then once they've won the military battle and that's over, then you figure out the rest. But unfortunately, that's not what they did. And it resulted in even more deaths of American soldiers and Vietnamese citizens, and Viet Cong than was necessary, in my opinion. But our military won every major battle. They lost a political war. And so I also will say this: one of the greatest tragedies of our recent history. There's 3 or 4 great sins in our country in the last 100 years. Obviously, slavery, abortion is one, but how our troops were treated when they came home from the Vietnam War, a war they were sent to go fight. A lot of them were drafted and sent to go fight, is one of the great sins. So when we get a chance to honor one of you, like my guy here, I want to make sure we do so, because we appreciate you. That's not a war y'all wanted to fight. That was a war somebody sent you to fight, and we didn't take care of you when you got back. But we appreciate you, my man, very, very much. Let's get to some more football questions.
From ND, it just means more. Pair the 2018 Notre Dame recruiting class with the 2024 class and the 23 class with the 2017 class. What would be your starting lineup for the two, and who would win on the field?
Oh, man. So I got to pair the 2018 class. Goodness gracious. Let's go look at the 2018 Notre Dame class. So that was the class that had Kyle Hamilton in it. No, that was not Kyle Hamilton's class. He was in the 19 class. That was the Houston Griffith class. That class was one of the most disappointing Notre Dame classes ever, Trev. I thought that class was going to be so good, and it ended up not panning out the way that I hoped. Jurkovic obviously never got his chance in Notre Dame. Derek Allen, I totally whiffed on that one. So I got to compare 2018 and 2014 is who he wants to pair, correct? Isn't that what he says in the question? So
if we're looking at 24 paired.
So if we're pairing 18 and 24, my starting quarterback, as much as I love Phil Jurkovic, my starting quarterback is CJ Carr. My starting running back is Aeneas Williams. The 18 class was Sebo Flemister and Jameer Smith. My starting wide receivers, based on what we know of them now, would be Kevin Austin. Was in that receiver class. That actually was one of the parts of the class that I thought ended up being pretty good. My starting receiving core would be Kevin Austin, Tariq Bracy was pretty good. And I mean, I'd probably go Lawrence Keys, to be honest with you. Cam Williams, as far as like what we know, Lawrence ended up having a nice career at Tulane. If just on God-given talent alone, I'd go Kevin Austin, Cam Williams, and Braden Lindsey. I'd have Cam at Z, Kevin at boundary, and then Braden Lindsey at Z. And then you'd have like Lawrence Keys coming off the bench. You'd have Micah Gilbert in the rotation. So I'd probably go there. Tight end, that class had two pretty good tight ends. They would probably be my two top tight ends. George Takis and Tommy Trumbull would be my two top tight ends in that class. Offensive line, going at 24, I would have Gerby Lambert. I'd have Gerby Lambert at tackle. I'd have Jarrett Patterson at center. Anthony Knapp at guard. Trying to think through some of the other offensive linemen. Cole Mabry had a bunch of injuries. He was a good football player. He just couldn't stay healthy. That offensive line class outside of Patterson, I don't remember doing a whole lot. So then I'd probably go Gerby, Patterson, Knapp, Peter Jones as maybe one of my other guards. And then who's the tackle? Styles, maybe? Defensively, defensive line, 2024 defensive line. Who'd you have, Trev? You had Sevillano, you had Cole Mullins, you had Chris. No, you didn't have Logan Thomas. Burgess was a 25 kid. Bryce Young, so I'd have Bryce Young starting.
Yeah.
And then I would have Jason Adamiola starting at D tackle, Bryce Young at one of my ends. Jamion Franklin I'd probably have as my nose between those 2 years. Jamion ended up being a really good, nice player at Duke. And then my other defensive end, who was the defensive ends in that class? You had Jason Adamiola or Justin Adamiola. Jason was interior. I'd probably go Cole Mullins, some other defensive end. My linebackers, that's an easy one. Kingston.
Yeah.
Kingston, Villiamas at linebacker. The other linebackers in that class. It's Kingston, Teddy Rizak, Bodie Cahoon. It was in the 2018 class. Jack Lamb, if Jack Lamb could have stayed healthy, he could have been a really good player, man. He really could have. I'd probably go Kingston and Jack Lamb is probably where I'd go there. Cornerback, I mean, that's an easy one. Leonard Moore would be one for sure. And then Tariq Bracy would be my nickel.
Yeah.
I'd probably have, at safety, I'd have Tay Johnson. Yeah. Secondary would be pretty nasty. Tay Johnson. See, who else am I going to have at receiver or at corner? But see, this is the problem with lists like this. It takes so long to work through the list. It's like we're going to use 30 minutes of the show just like going through and trying to refresh our memory on who were on the rosters. But I don't know. Houston Griffith would be in my rotation. Noah Boykin ended up being a disappointment. TJ Brown's in my safety rotation.
Yeah.
I'd have Joe Wilkins in my receiver rotation. I don't know. The opposite corner wouldn't be as good. It'd probably have to be Carson. Carson Hobbs probably would have to be my other corner.
Yeah.
And then what's the other one, Trev?
13 and 17. Or
23 and 17.
23 and 17.
I just off top of my head, because I don't really want to go through and have to go through the entire class again to get starters, but I'd probably go the 2017-23 class. I mean, think about some of the guys in that class. My tight ends would be Brock Wright and Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
On the offensive line, I'd have Robert Hainsey, Josh Lugg, Aaron Banks. On defense, the 23 class would give me Charles Jagasaw. That line would be ridiculous. It'd be Charles Jagasaw. You have Sullivan Absher, Sam Pendleton, were guys from that class. Cooper Flanagan's not seeing the field at tight end because he's coming in with Brock Wright and Cole Kmet. And you got Dylan Gibbons in that offensive line class. My defensive line would have guys like, you remember Darnell Ewell? Man, I thought he was going to be really good, but it had Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah on that starting defense. Kurt Heinisch is on that defense. Man, that would have had some dudes in it. That class did not have a quarterback. So you'd have Kenny would be your starting quarterback. Kenny Minchie would be your starting quarterback. It also was not a very good receiver class. You'd have to rely on the 23 receiver class would almost entirely be the starting lineup. Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse, you know, Rico Flores, Braylon James, guys like that. Defensive line wise, linebacker wise. I mean, you have KK Smith at receiver, part of that conversation as well. Yeah. Joe Otting would be a depth player at receiver. I mean, that's a pretty good class. Defensive end, you'd have Boubacar. I mean, come on. You have Drake Bowen at linebacker with Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think was he in that class? Drew White was in that class too. He was a really good player at Notre Dame. So I'd have to go 17 and 23, Travis, is that. Yeah.
Same page over here.
Mm-hmm. Yep. This is kind of one of those ones like it from Holiday Every Day. You're starting a wide receiver room from scratch. You can pick between Jeff Samardzija or Michael Floyd. Who you got? That's an easy one. That's Michael Floyd.
It's Michael Floyd.
Love Jeff Samardzija, but that's an easy one.
Mm-hmm. Super chat from M. Moore. Appreciate you. I see Adon Schuler is one of the most underrated safeties in college football from a national view. Do you agree? And what round do you believe he ends up being drafted?
I'll say again, this isn't a cop-out. I'm just not an NFL draft expert. That's not my thing. So I kind of think he's probably a day 2 pick. Late second to late third, somewhere in there would be an ideal landing spot for him. Most likely somewhere in the third. I mean, if Xavier Watts is a 3rd-round pick, I think Adon Schuler is going to probably be a 3rd, 4th-round pick, I guess, is where I would say. But I also think Xavier Watts is criminally underrated. And I think eventually they're going to start realizing that these Notre Dame safeties are pretty flipping good, and they'll stop overlooking them. But, I mean, I think Adon is not only underrated nationally, I think he's underrated by some Notre Dame fans. You know, and obviously we talk a lot about Tay as a fan base, and deservedly so. Tay Johnson had a great redshirt freshman season, but, like, it's still no-brainer who their best safety is right now, and it's Adon Schuler. Tay was more flashy. Adon was more steady after the first game. So I agree with you that he's very, very underrated. Very underrated. Look, I mean, I think it was Georgia offered him a huge deal to try to leave Notre Dame and go. So I always say is, like, don't listen to what national analysts say. Look at who the coaches are going after. Look at who the coaches game plan for, and you'll find out who they fear.
Yeah, he's definitely criminally underrated. I would be surprised if he went, and this isn't a shot at him. It's just, personally, I would be surprised if he went in the first 3 rounds, not from a skill set perspective. But unfortunately, Adon is somebody that they don't have. He doesn't have that NFL, I guess, frame, you could call it. I think one of the reasons why a lot of fans also immediately get attracted to Tay Johnson is because he's 6'2", he's long, he's rangy. Adon's kind of more of that thumper. He's 6 foot tall. So it was the same thing that kind of plagued Xavier Watts. Like, I don't know what combine number he's gonna go put up, but I don't see Adon being a 4.4 guy. You know, so
I think he might test better than Xavier, but agree that he won't most likely be like a low to mid 4.4 guy.
Yep. Okay. That and the NFL continues to devalue the safety position. So that's the other thing, just working against any safety going.
This is kind of a 2-part question from Salty. I don't think he intended it to be a 2-parter. It's just 2 different questions, but I think they kind of go together. Here's the first one, Trev.
Should Notre Dame continue to have the blue gold game or eliminate it as a number of schools have done?
I think they absolutely should have it. I think that eliminating it, it's not even so much that you're hurting the team, because I don't know how much you're hurting the team by not having a spring game. You can just have a scrimmage that nobody attends and at the end of the spring and call it a day. What I think you're doing, though, is I think you're hurting the fan base. That is the lifeblood of your program. You know, people say there's this push going on, and it's like a lot of things, Trevor. It's 2 extremes. There's the fans that think that they're entitled to say or do whatever they want because they are paying fans. I say there are certain things that if you say to a player, you deserve to get punched in the face like DK Metcalf punched that guy in the face. If what that guy was accused of saying, he said, you know what, you should get your butt kicked. I'm sorry. You know my stance on that, Trev. That guy is a kind of a piece of crap, in my opinion. But at the same time, there's this opposite pushback of like, well, fans don't really matter. We shouldn't do anything for the fans. This is about the players and the team and all that. And I'm like, you know what you are if you remove fans from the Notre Dame football program? Do you know what you are if you remove their fans? You're a D3 program. That's what you are. Your entire program is funded by your school, and you're not going to be what you are. You take away the TV money, you take away the apparel money, because why would TV companies and apparel companies pay tens of millions of dollars to programs? Why do they do that? Because they love football, or because they view it as a free that's how they make money, because people watch. If people stopped watching, if you had the same size of a fan base that D3 schools have, that's what you would be. You'd be a D3 school, where you don't have scholarships, you don't, all these different things. And so we need to remember that the fans are truly the lifeblood of sports, in that when you lose them, you don't have the sport anymore. You're just a rec league team, or you're a D3 team, where you're just, you've got your fans that go to that school and the parents of the players, but that's about it. And so fans are what ultimately build. Well, what about this coach and player? Yeah, of course they played a very important role. They're the ones doing the work, but it's the fans that then watch and follow and tune in, and that are the reason for that. And I think sometimes we forget that a little bit in our modern society on one end. And then on the opposite end, there's the people that think, well, I paid $100 for a ticket so I can say and do whatever I want. No, that's not how it works either, in my opinion. So I think that this blue gold game should happen every year for the reasons we say all the time. This is something you're giving back to the fan base. This is a chance in the spring for your fans to come watch your team play again. It's a tradition a lot of people have. And a lot of the fans who necessarily can't necessarily afford to go to a game in the fall, because tickets are so expensive and parking is so expensive and hotels are so expensive, that it's an opportunity to get some of those fans here, especially local fans. And so I think that's something that you owe to your fan base. That's my opinion. Do you have an opinion on that, Trev, before we move on to part 2 of this that you want to share, or do you want to wait till part 2 to give kind of your whole thing? Okay. So here's part 2. Salty says, which format for the blue gold game do you prefer? A full scrimmage or a series of drill-like activities, as was the case last season? I think last season it was both.
Yeah.
They did a 7-on-7 and a full scrimmage. So I'll let you kind of answer the first question, Trev, and then I'll let you also answer this one as well.
Yeah, the spring game absolutely has to go on, in my eyes, for everything that it means to the fan base. And plus, look at the schools that did cancel it. There's no reason that I can buy into that they gave as to why they canceled it. I'm always just going to assume that they're just kind of full of it. It's like, just say you don't want to put the work to put on an event for fans. It's not because of, we don't want people seeing our players in action. It's like, dude, it's the transfer portal era. They're going to see it anyway.
And that's gone anyway now that there's not a spring window. You can't even use that anymore.
Yeah, like there's no reason and no backing that I can look at any program and like agree as to why they did it. But like, okay, you know what? That actually makes sense. Just come out and say it's because you didn't feel like putting in the extra effort to put on an event for fans. And it would be easier for you to just do it for Notre Dame, inside of the Goog or on one of the practice fields. But there's no excuse as to why you can't. So that's the other reason why I think that it should go on. But yes, for fans especially, I agree. As far as the format goes, I actually kind of liked what they did this past season. The 7-on-7 was a cool aspect. I think that gave other players like Anthony Rizak and Blake Hebert and Scrap Richardson made a couple of plays. And I think that gave players opportunities like that in the middle of the game to have more of a moment than just like, all right, there's 2 minutes left on the clock. Put in the guys that, most likely aren't going to play in the 2025 season. Let's, give them their moment in the spring game. They were able to come in and compete. And plus, I'm a little biased because I love 7-on-7. If I was like a left guard, I don't know how much I would be thrilled about seeing 7-on-7, but I loved it. So I thought that was a great new wrinkle. I think the blend of both, because I also don't want them to do. I know what other schools have gone to is it's kind of like the NFL Pro Bowl, and they're just doing like little mini games. I think that's pointless. If you're going to do that, then I don't need to go to the. I mean, still host a spring game. I just won't be as inclined to go. That's me personally. But yeah, I like the
What's
blend.
that format that you're talking about there?
Like they
that
just
teams
do
have
like
done?
I've seen teams go to formats where it's like they just do, the drills that we see like indie period. They just let fans come into the stadium and see like indie period or
They're
something.
basically to a practice.
Yeah. And it's
Okay.
like, I won't pay, even if it's $10, I'm not going to pay and drive 2.5 hours to go see that. But I would go see a blend of last year for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting, Trev, because I think, here's what I think. I would love to see the game just continue as a game. Like, that's my preference. If there are seasons in which you can't, let's say your numbers are such that it just doesn't make sense for us to play a full game. We're down to 9 offensive linemen. You know what I mean? Like, there's something, injuries or whatever have kept you. Because I don't want a guy having to play through an ankle injury for a spring game like he would on Saturday against Michigan State. You know what I mean? Where it's like, guys battling back from a sprained ankle. You put some tape on it, you brace on it, maybe you give him a localized, shot or something like that, and you battle through it. I'm not doing that for a freaking spring game. Just not. Anyone that's got any kind of minor tweak, I'm not playing them in a spring game. I'm not talking about a guy that's got like a bruise on his, little, like you like a legitimate injury. Let's say you're in a situation where that's the case. Then I actually think it'd be a lot of fun to say, well, let's have a little bit of combination of both, Trev. You get there, you go through Indy, you have your special teams periods if you want, and then do some of the different things you do during a practice. On one side, 50-yard going in, we're doing DB receiver one-on-ones. Other side, pass rush 101s, like you do in a practice, and then you do a 7-on-7, competition, sort of like maybe like a, field one, then you do a red zone one, and then you go to a scrimmage, and the scrimmage is like a half. You play like a half of football. And it's offense versus defense. So you don't need like the gold team, the blue team, because that's where you can kind of protect yourself against numbers. We only got 9 healthy offensive linemen, so they'll all 9 play, but it's for one team. And do something like that where you're getting real action, it's things that people can cheer for, be excited for. You could even like have fun with it. You could have like the announcer like, here we go, folks. It's Jordan Faison against, Christian Gray for all the mark. And you're keeping score, like wins for the offense, wins for the defense. You can have some fun. Like you get a point for a catch. You get a point for an incompletion. You get 2 points for a contested catch, which is one where you got to leave your feet. You get 2 points for a breakup. You get, 6 for an interception, 6 for a touchdown. What, you know what I mean? Like have some fun with it and have like the announcer, like, here we go. Down here, we got, Jaden Greathouse matched up against Don Schuler. Let's see, keeping score. I mean, you could have some fun with that. And the crowd, I think, would get into that. And then you get to your scrimmage. And then I'm not seeing CJ Carr ain't playing in the scrimmage. You know what I mean? Like
Sure.
Leonard Moore's not playing in the scrimmage. That kind of thing. But then that's where you really get your young guys and some of your, guys that are battling for positions and things like that to get their chance to play. And you could have some fun with it if you're in a year where there's just not a lot of numbers. And I think fans would enjoy, I would enjoy that, but there's still like that scrimmage at the end where we get a chance to see real football, and if you didn't want to do a scrimmage of like true 11 of 11, then do it like you do in a scrimmage in a practice where you start every time at the 35 and you're doing this and you're doing, there's a lot of ways you can do it. But what I don't want to see ever is what I saw when I watched Ohio State's spring game a couple years ago. They literally just would not allow them to tackle. Like that's just, there's no point to that. If you don't want to have them tackle, then don't let Jeremiah Smith get tackled and let it be kind of what we talked about. Let Jeremiah Smith compete in the 1-on-1s and the 7-on-7s and that kind of stuff. And then, because you're not tackling in 7-on-7, you don't tackle in a practice during 7-on-7. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I think that would be a lot of fun. I think a lot of people would have fun with that, and I certainly would enjoy covering it. We'd probably get more out of that from a practice report, like game report type of thing, than we would just a normal blue gold game. That's something I would enjoy to see, Trev, as long as it's a combo of the two things. I don't want to just see a practice and then you got the 15-minute team period at the end of practice like we get sometimes. Like, I wouldn't want to see that. But some competition, some drills and things like that, where they're going at each other and you can have the announcer, down there emceeing it or whatever. And then, then have your, an actual game, half of a game. Like, get rid of the running clock portion with the young players and let them play the first 2-quarter type of style of a real scrimmage. Got 100 kids on the roster. You telling me you can't get 50 of them ready to play a half of football against each other?
Right.
So that actually I think would be a ton of fun. Like, I'd love that. I really would.
Oh, I think that'd be a lot of fun. Some of it too, and this is just me speaking from this is just speaking from a fan's perspective. I would not drive 2.5 hours to see that. I think it'd be a lot of fun. But if I'm going to go inside a Notre Dame stadium and pay and travel, I would want to see the majority of it be a game. I think that's a great idea. I would thoroughly enjoy watching it. But my biggest fear would be I wouldn't want to see inside run, for 15 minutes of the time.
No,
dude.
definitely not. No,
Yeah.
and that's not you're not going to have. It's not a practice, but to me,
Right.
if watching, because here's the thing, you're in the format I talked about. I'm not down there watching them do inside run, but watching the pass rush one-on-ones, those get in, that's fun. But then watching Quincy Porter and Leonard Moore go battle or something like that, you're going to see a lot more from your receivers and DBs in that period than you would in a game where the second half is a 15-minute running clock.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so it's all the competition stuff is from practice that I would want to see. I don't want to see, like you said, inside run, half line, half field reads, stuff like that. No, I don't want to see that. I don't want to see, there's a lot of that stuff that I wouldn't really care to see. But it's the competition stuff that 100%. I think that people would really enjoy. I don't want to see a skills competition where they're, not go, you know what I mean? Where it's the quarterbacks are throwing the bags, and I don't want to see all that mess. Like you said, I don't want to see the Pro Bowl stuff. I want to see real competition. And I think some of that stuff would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man.
A lot of fun. And you could do something where during the team period, if you didn't want to have it as a real scrimmage, you could still do team stuff where you're keeping points and you're doing this and you're doing that, which would be kind of fun to compare. But yeah, I think that'd be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. But again, just so we're clear, that's if for some reason you don't have enough people to do a real game.
Super chat from Packers Total Access. Appreciate you, Clayton. The consensus big board has a Don Schuler at 83. With great testing, could absolutely climb into the second round. NFL GMs love Notre Dame safeties, though.
I mean, do they? I just feel like if NFL teams loved Notre Dame safeties, I don't see Xavier Watts lasting till towards the end of the third round.
Yeah, I don't.
You know what I mean? They love Kyle Hamilton. Alohi Gilman was a 6th-round pick. Julian Love was a 4th-round pick.
I mean, and even Kyle Hamilton dropped. He was getting
14,
top 10. Yeah, he was getting top 10 grades, and then just teams kept passing on him, and then the Ravens were okay. So, yeah. Yeah. I'm with you.
Yep.
Super chat from Florida Irish. Appreciate you. Can you compare and contrast how people feel now about Ash with how people felt about Golden after his first year? There's grumbling then, too, that obviously was later resolved.
Yeah, I think it's kind of pointless to compare the two, to be honest with you, Florida Irish, because they're in very different scenarios and very different situations. I mean, Al Golden was walking into being the D coordinator on a first-year head coach's staff. The roster wasn't the same. We didn't know a lot about Al Golden at the time. And honestly, Al Golden made some mistakes that were some pretty big mistakes early on. But I think the whole grumbling about Al Golden thing is a little bit overplayed. I mean, obviously we pointed out things that he didn't do well, but I mean, I thought that I said even early in 2020, 2022 that like, look, the big mistake that the defense made in 2022 obviously was you had the bad call after Treat Bracey got hurt where he went with a double safety blitz when you had a true freshman on the field at nickel against Ohio State. And then you had given up the 3rd and long conversion against Marshall that led them on that long touchdown drive. But like other than that, I'm like, dude, the defense gave up 19 points. You didn't lose to Marshall because of the defense.
Yeah.
You didn't lose to Ohio State because of the defense. So like, I don't know what this grumbling that people keep talking about. Look, fans are always, there's always going to be a segment of the fan base that has something to complain about.
Yep.
And so I think that's overplayed. I don't remember a lot of people, we certainly didn't blame Al Golden for why the defense struggled. I had some issues. I thought Al Golden's defense was too complex early on. I thought it was harder for some of the young guys to play. I thought they made a mistake in 23, not playing Drake Bowen more than it. So Al Golden was far from perfect, but this notion that Al Golden was somehow just like treated the same way that Chris Ash did, so what? Even if he was, what's the point? Al Golden got it fixed. That doesn't have anything to do with Chris Ash. Like, just because some former coach got better after a rough start, if we grant the premise, doesn't mean that this coach will do the same thing because they're two different people. And I would argue that Chris Ash already righted the ship in 2025. The question that is there, that is a very legitimate question, is this. What does Chris Ash believe? Because with Al Golden, the complaint then was he has a very complex defense that it took his players some time to learn. But he didn't have to change who he was. It just, as they learned it more, they got better at it. This is a guy who did something completely against what they had done and what the talent dictates that just did not work, that then had to shift gears a third of the way through the season, and then it looked great. So it's fair to ask, is that what he wants to do at Notre Dame, or is that what he wants to do at Notre Dame? That was not the argument with Al Golden. With Al Golden, it was, could you simplify this a little bit so that the kids can learn it? It wasn't a scheme problem.
Right.
It was a too much going into the offense problem. And so the people, here's my beef. People that are nonstop complaining about Chris Ash and just ignoring the last 8-9 games of the season are not being honest in their assessments of Chris Ash. They're not. People that want to say, well, he had nothing to do with the turnaround, and I see it in the chat. He didn't right the ship. Marcus Freeman did. Marcus Freeman wasn't calling plays, folks. Yes, I do believe that Marcus Freeman and Chris Ash had a conversation, or several, where it said, hey, we need to emphasize this, this, and this. And Chris Ash eventually started doing that. I believe that to be true. But I can assure you as a former football coach, and I don't often like pull rank on this, but I can assure you of this, and anyone that's ever coached football knows this. If a coordinator's not bought into what he's being told to do, it won't look like it looked in the last 8 games of the year. It won't. The only way you can have the success that he had in the last 8 games is because you bought into what the coach is asking you to do. I don't care what your talent level is. If you're not bought in, you're not going to hold Arkansas to 13 points. You're not going to hold USC to 24 points. You're not going to dominate down the stretch the way you dominated down the stretch. So the notion, and Jim, I'm not saying you said that. You asked the question, but a lot of people are saying that. And what I'm telling you is this is the case. And then on the opposite side of this debate, Trev, are people who only want to focus on the last 8 games and then pretend that the first 3 games didn't happen or don't matter. And I think that's a bit misguided as well, because clearly he believed this is a form of defense that's successful because he ran it against the 2 best teams they played. And they went 0-2. And the guy that we believe, one of the guys we believe had a big role in the success of it going down the road is no longer at Notre Dame. So I think it's fair to say Chris Ash did some really good things in the last 2/3 of the season. some really good things. And if Chris Ash continues doing that in 2026, this defense will be elite. While also saying, but I am a little nervous that he goes back to what they did in the first couple games. But let me also say this. If they do revert to what they did in the first 2 games, it won't be as bad as it was the first 2 games. Because the players have a lot more experience doing those things now.
Yeah.
And they'll be better at it. So the frustrating thing about this whole debate is that, once again, it's another debate where people don't want to be honest about the entire picture. They want to take one side or the other and then spin all the arguments to fit that one side, when in reality the truth is in the middle. Chris Ash, not Chris Ash because Freeman made him every week or Freeman forced it, but Chris Ash, as the D coordinator, did a heck of a job in the last 8 games of the season. A heck of a job. But Chris Ash also made this bed that he's got to lay in now because of what he did the first 3. Game 4 was kind of in between. You know what I mean? And so you both are a part of his resume. So it's fair to say, hey, what's going to be the greater emphasis in 2026? I think it's a fair question. I think it's a very fair question. But I get frustrated by this notion that we have, or this extremes that we have. But I also kind of get tired of the comparisons to past coaches, because that could be like, well, Harry Hiestand did this, so that must mean Jeff Quinn's going to do this, or Joe Rudolph is going to do this. No, they're 2 different coaches. They're 2 absolutely different coaches. I mean, Harry Hiestand led Notre Dame as the offensive line coach to the national title game his first year. Jeff Quinn in his first year was part of a team that went and played for a championship as well, because they made the college football playoffs. Does that mean they're the same people? No, they're not, because the offensive lines and the rest of Harry Hiestand's tenure looked a whole lot different than a lot of the offensive lines that Jeff Quinn coached. They're different people. And the reasons why Al Golden did get criticism at the beginning of his tenure, which there was criticism, but it's not the same as what it is now, was not that he was running a scheme that was bad. He was running a scheme that was a little too complex for college players to adapt to. And so it took some time for them to learn it. But schematically, it was sound. It was good. There were some play calls you didn't love. That's not the argument that people are making about Chris Ash. So they're 2 very different things. And whether or not Al Golden got it turned around really doesn't matter. And with all due respect, I completely understand why people have skepticism about Chris Ash, but I think you can't be skeptical of it without also acknowledging that he is the play caller. Right? Remember that conspiracy during the season? They'd show pictures of him on the sideline. He was never talking. So there's this assumption of who's really calling plays. I'm like, guys, Chris Ash is calling plays. You know what I mean? It's like, just every time they got a picture of Marcus Freeman, he's yelling at somebody. Does that mean that Marcus Freeman's walking around yelling the entire time? No, it's just that's when the camera goes to him. You know what I mean? Like, there's just, look, Chris Ash has to do this year what he did in the last 8 games of last year. It's just simple as that. Just simple as that. Will he do that or not? We'll find out. But let's not pretend he wasn't the coordinator of the first 3 games, and let's not pretend he also wasn't the coordinator of the last 8 either, because he was both.
Yeah. I mean, we see that the same. It's an unfair comparison. The way that I look at the whole play calling thing, take that principle of the same concept and apply it to something that we do every day, Brian. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, I was the first sports article that I published for Irish Breakdown was the first sports article that I had ever written. And I would like to think that I'm significantly better at it now than I am than I was.
So yeah.
And, yeah, like, I feel like I'm significantly better at it now than I was in July or August, whenever I started, of 2024. I feel like I'm better at it now in February of 26. And it's because Brian sat me down and was like, hey, here's some of the things that I'm looking for. Here's some of the things of how I like to tailor articles, or how we tailor articles here at Irish Breakdown. That would be like somebody saying, Brian's basically writing Trev's articles. It's you can sit down and have the expectation of like, hey, here's what you do here.
Yeah.
And now it's up to you to go do it. And then I went and did it. So that'd be like the same thing.
And then you applied the lessons that I gave you going through that article to where now I don't have to necessarily hold your hand through all those kind of things. Yep. Hey, this is what, and honestly, Trev, there's been times that I've said to you, hey, Trev, this isn't what I want, that's my fault. Because I didn't let you know that this is the expectation, that I wanted it this way. This is my fault. This is what I want you to do next time. Well, I think that's kind of what Marcus Freeman did. You didn't do a good enough job making sure that Chris Ash understood exactly what you were doing and that you were looking over him enough.
Yep.
You were focused on your other things and you didn't stay on top of it. And I've had to do that with different writers that I've had. Say, hey, man, like, this isn't what we look for. That's on me. I didn't give you the kind of guidance you needed to do that. So how can I ask you to do something that I never told you I wanted it done that way? Or at least said it, but didn't really explain it and make it clear. So that's part of it. And you've got to get those things figured out.
Yep.
So, I think there's a lot of it's to the point, Trevor, where it's like, I find myself defending Chris Ash all the time now. And it's kind of getting on my last nerve.
Yeah.
Because I want to raise legitimate criticisms, but I feel like as soon as you do, there's a group of people on the message board, especially that they're like sharks, the blood in the water. Like, okay, now's our chance to just go destroy Chris Ash and repeat the same thing for the 97,000th time since September. You know what I mean? And it's like, you guys are going so far that you're forcing me to defend Chris Ash. Like, do you get how like wrong that is? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it gets really frustrating. It really does.
I get it.
It really does. So Florida Irish, I'm not so much like, all that rant wasn't about you. It just, you broached the topic that then led me to some other things that are coming from other people that aren't you. I think this is a fair thing to bring up. I just don't think it's the same thing. I think it's a very different thing.
Yeah. Super chat from Steve Rolfe. Appreciate you, Steve. How involved does the strength and speed staff get involved in Notre Dame recruiting?
Well, I don't think they get involved in recruiting other than just like giving presentations during visits. Like, they're not calling kids, talking to kids, but where they're involved in it, Steve, this is a very good question, is in the evaluation process. If you have a good strength program, and I know Matt Bayless was someone that that Kelly's staff relied on a lot, where they'd want him to size a kid up. You know, what do you think about the frame? Do you think this kid can put on weight? Do you think this kid can, put on weight? How do you think this kid moves? I'm like, that kid's really stiff. Like, yeah, he's real powerful, but that kid's got terrible hips and he's got really tight ankles. And I just don't think when you put him on a field and he's got to go against guys like Isaiah Foskey and he's going to struggle. Okay, cool. You want that. It's a part of the, now you may still go get a guy that, that he's not in love with. And that's part of the evaluation. But if you have a good strength coach, you absolutely get him involved in the evaluation stuff. Like, hey, I think this kid could put on 30 pounds and maintain his quickness. But then the strength coach meets him. He's like, no, look how narrow his hips are. Look how narrow his shoulders are. Like, that kid's he'll get to 300 pounds. Anyone get 300 pounds, but he's going to lose all his flexibility and athleticism when he gets 300 pounds, and he won't be as physical and powerful. Let's just two starting offensive linemen from the past 15 years, right? Mike Golick and Anthony Knapp are very similar in size. 6'3", 6'4", 300 pounds, right? Well, Anthony Knapp does not have to work as hard to get to 300 pounds as Mike Golick did. Mike Golick Jr. did. And Anthony Knapp plays with a different power level than what Mike Golick Jr. did at 300 pounds. Same body type, different games, different levels of – again, both starters on very good football teams. Mike Golick was a very important part of that 2012 offensive line. This isn't a shot at him. It's just because you're the point is just because you're 300 pounds doesn't mean you play with the same power. Another example is Robert Hainsey. Robert Hainsey doesn't have the power that Anthony Knapp had, as a player. Now, he was more comfortable in space and he was more technically sound and things like that, but like, same size, different overall skill set. And so you have to be able to look at that, and the strength coach a lot of times can help you with those things. So that's where a strength coach will get involved in recruiting, in my opinion.
No, that makes sense. If I was a position coach and I was hitting the recruiting trail hard, the strength and conditioning coach would be one of my closest, not necessarily advisors, more so resources in that. Absolutely. Absolutely. Getting into part 2 of the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Got the Friday free-for-all mailbag, and we have Roll Irish getting us kicked off here in part 2 of the Super Chat. Appreciate you. Which position group has the widest gap between starters and backups? How does this depth impact performance in the biggest games?
Oh, boy.
I would I got an answer for this one if you needed some time to think on it.
Let's first, when we say gap, are we talking about talent, experience, like, or all of it? Like what are we determining the gap to mean?
I took it as like readiness to just
Okay.
step up into the starting
Okay.
lineup and go.
Okay. Because I'll say talent wise, I don't see a ton of gaps. And in some positions,
Same.
your backups are going to be your most talented guys. But if it's about readiness and ability to step on the field right now and play, okay, Trev, you go first.
I would say across the board, because it's not the same for all of the 5 starting offensive linemen or their backups in the 2 deep. But as a 5-man unit, I would probably say the biggest gap in a position group between starter and backups would be the offensive line in terms of readiness across the board, I would say. It would probably be them. Yeah, I'm probably going to stick with the offensive line.
It's fair.
Yeah. Offensive line, or if we're just going with one, I see it in the chat too. If we're just going with like a position, like the quarterback would also be the other big gap. But when I think
that's kind of where I was going. The other one that I would look at,
yep,
is quarterback. I have a lot more faith that Chris Tarrick and Joe Otting and Styles Prescott and Matty Augustine could step in against Wisconsin and help lead you to victory than I would any of the quarterbacks at this point in time. Yeah. All right, let's get to some more questions down here. We got one from Domer Grizz.
Happy Friday. How many games on the 2026 schedule could we simply out-talent if the coaches play a B- game?
11 of them. I think if the coaches do a B- game, they go 1-1 between, I'd say 2-1 between Miami, BYU, and SMU.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in a B- game is like, with the talent on this roster, a B- coaching game wouldn't necessarily look like a B- game, I guess, if that makes sense.
I mean, we've seen some of those. What was the game? Boise, I thought was probably a B- game offensive, if that offensively. I didn't, there was what was the other game? They ran I mean, honestly, Texas A&M was a F game from the defensive staff and a C+ game from the offensive staff, and they lost by a point.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, the preparation level for Boston College was like a D, and they won by 15 points on the road. I mean, it's just, yeah, a B- game, Domer, wouldn't look like a B- game from the coaching staff because of the level of talent. But I'm with you, Brian. 11, they'd be 11-1.
They won't go undefeated if that happens.
No.
Yeah.
Another super chat from Steve. Appreciate you, Brian. When you were coaching, did you ever have to work for a coordinator you didn't like, and did it affect how you did your job?
That I didn't like as a person? No. I worked for Scott Isfording, who my first year, he was our first offensive coordinator. I liked Izzy a lot. He was a great first-year mentor for me as an offensive coordinator. I liked him quite a bit. My second job, the offensive coordinator, was a guy named Corey Goff, who I think he's the athletic director at Muhlenberg now, I believe. But I had a great deal of respect for him. Is he? No, he left the AD in 2018. So yeah, he's somewhere else now. He's at a place called Thomas Jefferson in Philly, which would make sense because his wife was a lawyer down in Philadelphia. But I got along very well with Corey. He was another good mentor I had, taught me a lot. The other OC I worked for was a guy named Greg Gattuso, who's our head coach at Duquesne. And I mean, we didn't necessarily get along as people. He's a very different guy than I was, but loved working with him because I learned a lot and he listened to me. He's the guy that I told people, he got real intense in games and he, threatened to fire me, threatened to stick a fork in my eye. But you just knew that was good too. So he was a yinzer, you know what I mean? And yeah, I didn't actually fear that, okay, make sure we get in the locker room, he's not allowed to have any forks around him. That's just kind of how it was. But you know what he did when he threatened to, stick a fork in my eye? He called the play that I wanted him to call, and it went for an 85-yard touchdown. It's like an example again. Did I like him? Did we hang out all the time? No. Did I respect him? And as a football coach, in a lot of ways, yeah. But we were in a game, we're playing Iona up there, and we jumped up on them big, hit a couple big pass plays. They're coming back. We're driving. I can't remember what the score was, but we score. We're going to kind of put them away. And it's 3rd and goal from like the 6. And so coach calls timeout. And he goes, what do you guys think we should do here? And he would always go O-line coach first, quarterbacks coach second, running backs coach third. And he'd always ask me last. And our O-line coach goes, I think we should throw a fade to Michael. That's Michael Warfield, who's our best receiver. And then Dave Loya, our quarterbacks coach, goes, yeah, I think. And Sean, what's this, Lavara? I forget what Sean Lyota, I think is his name. Says, I think we. So they all were like, throw a fade to Michael. And he goes, what do you think we should do, Driscoll? He goes, I assume you think we should throw a fade to Michael, meaning like my players. I said, no. So we should run a draw to Hilly. And he goes, why? I said, because apparently everybody in the stadium thinks we're going to throw a fade to Michael. So what do we call? Draw to Mike Hilliard. He walks into the end zone. You know what I mean? So like, he listened to me. So I like people that listen to me. And then the other head coach I work for is Matt Kelchner. It's Christopher Newport, who I had a lot of respect for, built that program literally from scratch. Did we always see eye to eye? No, we didn't. Did we have disagreements? We absolutely did. But I respected the hierarchy. The only coach that I ever worked for that I genuinely did not like and did not respect was, I won't even say his name, but it was the coach I worked for at Defiance. He was way in over his head and was not nearly as smart as he thought he was. And that hindered my job because I was not able to be the subservient employee that I needed to be, that I was supposed to be. And that's why I was let go. Because I just was like, nope, this isn't right by the kids. This isn't fair to the kids. The way he handled discipline with players that looked a certain way compared to how he handled discipline with players that looked a different way was not the same a lot of times. I didn't like that and made that known to him and to people. And the difference between me and the other coaches on his staff is they would all say the same things I said. I was the only one that had the balls to say it to his face. And that was the difference. Because I don't like gossips. If you're going to say something about head coach with us in the locker room, then you need to step up at some point in time and in the right way, say it to his face. And I think it did affect how I did my job. Because like I didn't have trust in him, so I wouldn't go execute things he'd teach me to do the way. I'd call plays in JV games, and he stopped letting me do that because I'd start running the offense the way that I thought it should be run, and we'd go score a bunch of points, and then he's like, can't do that anymore. You know what I mean? Got to run it my way. All right, fair. But honestly, he was right. I should have run it his way. It's his team. It's his offense. But I was too bullheaded to do that. And so that's also partly why I got out of coaching, because I just was like, I can't. I'm like, this is why I got out in the first place. You know what I mean? And he's the only one that I ever didn't like. And I do think it affected my ability to do the job well. I'll be honest. So it's a little bit about my coaching background. There you go.
Love it.
Yeah, I did like working for Gattuso in some ways. Some ways I hated working for him because the staff was very cliquey and very he took us out to dinner before the first game, before the season started, and he was like, I think I want to hire one of you guys to be the play caller next year. Well, I took that as, let me go show my thing. Let me go show what I do. And everybody else took that as, well, what can I do to undermine the other guy so I can get that job? Another reason I got out of coaching. It's like, no, dude. And then they'd start to kind of conspire against me because he'd always listen to me. And so they're like, well, we got to undermine Driscoll. It's that kind of stuff is what I hated about coaching. The actual bosses I had that I worked under, I learned so much about football in 1 year working under Joe Fincham. Just look around the country. John Hauser, who just got the head coaching job at Ohio, was on Joe Fincham's teams. Andy Waddle's a D3 head football coach. Tim Dowse is a defensive line coach, I think, for Pitt. he was a guy that played for Joe Fincham. A bunch of his players went on to be high school head football coaches. That's not an accident. You know what I mean? Scott Isfording was on that staff. He's an OC in the MAC, I believe, right now. So I learned a ton working under the late Mike Donnelly. I probably didn't have respect for anybody more than him. He passed away recently, several years ago. Loved working for him. So I was very fortunate to have some head coaches that I learned a lot about football and life from. And it's definitely very much a blessing for me in that regard. Didn't always get along with all the other assistants, but the people that were above me, I was very fortunate to be able to learn football and learn coaching and things from them. So that was pretty cool.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yep. Had another super chat pop up from Tyler Evans.
Appreciate you, Tyler. What is going on at Florida State?
Did something new happen today, Trev?
I'm not sure. I thought it was just all the
Malzahn. Yeah, look, I just honestly just think it boils down to, I think he's lost the locker room, and I think that people know he isn't getting it back.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Trev.
I was going to say, it's like all of this stuff, you just point back to who's piloting the ship.
Mm-hmm.
I learned everything I needed to know about the state of Florida State's program when he was actively trying to discipline a player on the sideline. I think it was against Clemson, and they were just actively laughing at him.
Yep.
I mean, that's all I needed to know.
Yep. Yeah, your program can't recover from that, because he does. And here's where he went wrong. He focused way too much early on the portal.
Yeah.
Now, he had to go to the portal to turn it around, but it's kind of like you see what Lincoln Riley's doing at USC. I think is smart. He went heavy into the portal early, but he never stopped recruiting. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It's the mistake that Lincoln Riley made that he's rectifying with Chad Bowden. He understands, yes, we have to go to the portal, but recruiting high school needs to be our lifeblood. He recognized that, and I don't think Mike Norvell ever truly recognized that.
Yeah.
And so when you bring in all these portal players, you have no culture. His first couple of years, they had a culture because he established a culture early on before the portal opened up. And then he got good, like, culture guys like Jared Verse, great culture guy. The big D tackle they got from Western Michigan a couple of years ago, Braden Fisk, real good culture player. Jordan Travis, great culture player as a transfer. And I mean, Verse had 2 years at Florida State, and Travis actually had 3 or 4 at Florida State. But he was able to establish a culture early on. But after 23, when all the original guys left, and he basically had to go back to the portal to rebuild the entire roster, there was no more culture. And then they didn't do a very good job of bringing in the right type of people. And I just think once you go down that road, and then he started making a bunch of panic moves to try to salvage things. And once you go down that path, you're toast. You're absolute toast. And then if you're a donor, I'm not giving all millions of dollars to you, knowing that you're not going to get this fixed and it's going to get wasted and we're not going to win.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So and then of course they're dealing with a lot of there's the report that came out about they're like $700 million of debt accrued. That's a little misguided because of the way that the stadium project gets counted towards that debt. They just spent like $300-400 million towards the stadium project that gets counted towards that debt the way that it's calculated. So it was a little bit misleading. That number was a little misleading because, and then of course they spent millions of dollars on the lawsuit, which was stupid, with the ACC. And then didn't recoup any of that with, going to bowl games. Like Miami took advantage of all that. So some of those numbers are a little bit misleading based on the fact that a lot of that is the stadium, and then they built like a new indoor facility. So like all that stuff is counted towards the debt. But it's a little bit of I think somebody put in the chat, Penn State has something like that going on too. So but yeah, it's a little bit misleading. But yeah, I just think he's done. I don't know that he knows how to recover.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't. All right, let's get back to the top. Let's get to some more questions here. We've got one from here we go. This is get some interesting questions today.
Yeah, from Domer Grizz, you've said Sheldon Day would do the opposite of what Brian Van Gorder called. Does a defensive coordinator have to be the worst for a player to do that? Or is it common for them to see something and go against the call?
So I don't know for a fact that Sheldon Day did that. Oh, so I just want to be clear. I'm saying based on what I'm seeing, I think that's what Sheldon Day was doing. There were times in key moments where Sheldon Day would go the opposite direction of everybody else. He would make a play. And I think it's because Sheldon kind of knew what was happening and he knew the call was just bad and he would just do his own thing. I do know that there were players that just kind of started doing their own thing under Van Gorder because they had no faith in him, rightfully so. But yeah, you've got to be a pretty terrible defensive coordinator, or you have to have players that don't have that. There's just not a good culture. There's not good leadership. That's actually a common thing that players just kind of do their own thing. And it's when you don't have discipline as a football team. We talked about that with Notre Dame. It's like, look, you can't go try to make a play. You got to do it within the framework of the defense. Otherwise, if you make a play, great. But then there was times where Sheldon kind of do his own thing. And then, a hole opens up and they're running through it. You know what I mean? So like, you've got to play within the framework of the defense. And if you have a coach that you don't trust, then obviously that's going to create some problems. But there were a lot of players that didn't have any faith in Brian McGorder. I mean, there was about to be a mutiny on that team after the Duke game. Like I was told there were players that were just not going to play anymore if he was still the D coordinator. Like Keith Gilmore tried to go at him during that game. Keith Gilmore is one of the nicest, calm dudes I've ever met and he had to be held back going after Brian McGorder in the middle of that game. He was the worst. And not just as a play caller. He was not a good person. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting in the airport one time with the starting linebacker for that team, and they would tell me some of the stories of he was done playing at that point in time. He'd tell me some of the stories of things he would say to players in the middle of practice. Like, I might have had to punch him in the face. I'm dead serious. Like, you say that about me or my mother or like, bro, we're going to have some problems. And then it just kept going. Brian Kelly did nothing about it. So, yeah, it's pretty awful. It's pretty terrible.
Yeah, you got to be a pretty bad coach for that to happen. Because we talk a lot on this show about, why do coaches never get held in question the same way that players do? It's like, well, because we all grew up being told that our coaches are always right. You do what your coach says. Do what your coach says. If you actively go out of your way to go against what a coach tells you, and this is from a player speaking from experience, when you do that, you have a really bad coach. Two-parter from Trev's Buy So Hold Glasses. Assuming traditional spring game setup, if the offense blows out the defense, is that indicative of how well the offense is doing or how much work is needed on the defense? Then also the inverse, assume traditional spring game setup, if the defense dominates the offense, is that indicative of how well the defense is doing or how much work is needed on the offense?
9 times out of 10, it's none of the above. I mean, especially the way that Notre Dame does it. You don't have the starting units together. You have these drafts where you're drafting different players. You've got different assistants that are the head coaches for these teams.
Yeah.
They're not calling a lot of their plays. A lot of the top players aren't even playing. A lot of it's indicative of nothing. It's not so much about the result. It's the work. It's the competition. The players need the work. The players need the ability to compete that's on the high level, that to go through a game day type situation, which is what a spring game is. It's a game day type situation. It's not a game day. It's not the same, but you have to go through it with the same. You're going through practice. You're going through stretch. You're going through pregame routine, just like you would on a Saturday. It's how a lot of people used to do it. And you get that opportunity. You run out of the tunnel. You do all those things. So that way, the first time you do it in the fall is not the first time you've done something like that. The result doesn't matter a whole lot. Look, Trev, I go back to the spring of 2015 when Deshaun Kaiser got outplayed by Montgomery Van Gorder in the blue gold game.
Yeah.
And people were freaking out. And I said during a show with the late, great Lou Emoji, like, dude, I think they're fine at quarterback. If Malik goes down, they're going to be fine. And because the thought was like, if Malik goes down, they're screwed because Kaiser sucks. And I was like, they're going to be fine. Kaiser's a good football player. And Malik goes down and Kaiser was fine. Because I didn't care what he did in a blue gold game. I saw what he done in state playoffs. I mean, I just didn't care what happens in a blue gold. I don't. Just like, Nate Montana won a MVP of the Blue Gold game one year. I don't care. It's not the result's not what I care as much about. It's the work, it's the competition, it's the ability to get in front of the stadium, get and play in front of stands, and go through that routine. So that way, the first time you do that, it's not necessarily in the fall.
Right.
And that's what I care about. It's the competition. It's opportunity to evaluate players for how they competed. Where are you at from an execution standpoint? Where are you at from a technical standpoint? So we now have building blocks to get you ready for the fall. I rarely care what happens in a spring game from a result standpoint.
Yep.
I think the work is important. I don't think the result is necessarily as important. Now, if your starting quarterback goes out there and throws 4 picks and doesn't look like he knows how to read a defense, that could be a little bit concerning unless you found out that, no, that's just coach told him to throw it every time. You know what I mean? Just like you'll see that in 7-on-7. I never would ever teach a quarterback to do that. But I know coaches that'll say, just you want him to always throw it. Just take a chance and give your guy a chance to go make a play. And I think that develops bad habits, but some people will do that. The only time I've ever said to throw it is if it's 1-on-1. But even then, I'm like, look, dude, throw it here to where your guy catches it or nobody does. You need to learn that sometimes. Like, yeah, that guy's covered on the post route. Where do you throw a post when the guy's covered? You know what I mean? Well, it depends on the coverage around it, but usually it's outside and over the top. You know what I mean? Because then the corner can't adjust to it and it'll make the play. So I don't think either one of those things are necessarily true by rule. Could there be a scenario where we watch the spring game and you're like, dude, I'm concerned. I just watched the starting offensive line get worked by Notre Dame's number 2 defensive line. This is a problem. Yeah, there might be some scenarios where that happens. But if it's like, well, why'd they get worked? Well, these 2 new starters didn't play well. Okay, so what? It's April. It's something's got to be worked on, but it rarely causes me like major issues. The only time I'd really have an issue is if like 3 guys got hurt and walked, had to be helped off the field or something like that.
Yeah, I take everything that happens in a spring game with a grain of salt now, especially now in this role and knowing what I know and doing what I do now. I mean, shoot, I remember when I was a kid, I remember watching Junior Jabby go crazy in a spring game. And then for the entire rest of the summer, I was like, dude, Notre Dame's got a guy. They are set.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just didn't play that much. So,
Yep.
From Tavis McKay, recruiting is a never-ending endeavor. What are key points besides getting kids to commit show you a coach is a good recruiter? Specifically, what will you be looking for with the new staff members?
Oh, boy. Evaluation. Who do they offer? Who do they stay on? Who do they go after now? Ability to quickly start building relationships. That's vitally important. I think those are the 2 first things that I look at. If a DB commits to Notre Dame next week, am I going to be like, wow, what a great job by Aaron Henry? Only if that DB is someone he was recruiting at Illinois, and it's someone that's good enough to play at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? Like, like when Kurt Signetti came to JMU or Indiana from JMU, he didn't bring all of the JMU players. He only brought the best JMU players. You know what I mean? Like, but in all seriousness, it's really about the evaluation, the ability to build relationships, and that fact that we just hear him. Like, is he, or when we talk to kids, has he already reached out to all the best players the minute his hire is official? Like, those are things that we're going to care about more than, like the early results won't matter as much to me. I mean, their first spring practice period where they're going to bring a bunch of groups of players in is not going to be till like late March. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, relationship building is a huge piece to that. Huge piece. Again, like I've said it before, I think of it a lot like sales. Like some salesmen live and die by the reputation and the backing of their company. And I mean, when you're a recruiter at Notre Dame, you're selling Notre Dame. But are you able to sell the vision for that player individually? Are you able to build a relationship so that they trust you? That's the biggest thing that I look for too, along with evaluation, man. Couldn't agree more. From Rabid Wombats, I hear people talk about different eras of college football. How many eras have there been? When was the last one, and what separates them? Rule changes, equipment, exercise, nutrition, science. Ooh.
For me, I mean, how long do they last? changes. I mean, they vary. Usually it's 10 to 20 years is usually about how long an era is going to be. And really the biggest thing for me is it's the changes in how the game is played. What's truly different about the 1980s compared to now? I mean, players are bigger, stronger, and faster to a degree, but there were some big players back then. Todd Light was pretty big cornerback. He's not looking up at Leonard Moore. You know what I'm saying? Like, he wasn't a small fella. Yeah, linemen are bigger now than they were then, but the biggest difference is how teams played.
Yeah.
You know, like there was the occasional run and shoot like Houston ran, and then, Miami had their fun and gun under Steve Spurrier. Miami had their, passing offense from under center, but like back then, hardly anybody played from under center or from shotgun regularly. Run games were different. You had a lot more teams running option, a lot more teams running 21 personnel. Like how the game is played evolves. And then the size of the players evolves too, but that's usually more over a 20 to 30 year period than it is 10 years. Like players 10 years ago aren't a whole lot different size-wise than players now. But you don't see a lot of teams doing what Alabama did in 2016 offensively and winning. You don't see teams that were doing what Jim Harbaugh did in early 2010s and winning. So it's more an evolution of how the game is played. Some of that's rule changes. Actually, I think a lot of that's rule changes, but there's a lot of other aspects to it. It's more so when I talk about it, it's more so about how the game is played. Like, how can I compare a quarterback that plays now? And this is an issue for the NFL because in 10 years, 10, 20 years, like all the passing records are going to be held by guys that played in the late 90s and beyond because of the way the game is being played. They're also playing more games now. There's Hall of Fame NFL quarterbacks that threw more interceptions than they did touchdowns in their careers because of the way the game was played. I mean, there's years where John Elway threw more picks than touchdowns. There was years where he was great and he threw close to as many interceptions as he did touchdowns. The game was very different. You go back and watch some games from John Elway in the 1980s, dude's doing like 9-step drops from under center. I mean, it was ridiculous. You're just like, he's throwing 2-yard crossing routes, but the ball's traveling like 15 yards. I mean, it was crazy how the game was played. But like, the year that John Elway won the MVP, he threw 19 touchdown passes and 12 interceptions. Could you imagine? And he threw for 3,198 yards. Now it's 12 yards, 12 games. It was a strike season. Could you imagine a guy throwing for 3,200 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 12 picks, getting even discussed about MVP honors nowadays? Like, no, of course not. But I mean, from 1983 to 1992, John Elway was only in the top 5 of MVP voting twice. He was a dominant player. The Broncos went to the Super Bowl in 1989 in the year where John Elway threw as many interceptions, 18, as he did touchdowns. They went to a Super Bowl another year. We threw 19 and 13. But then when he went to the Super Bowl in 97, he had 27 touchdowns and 11 picks and 3,600 yards. Was he a better player then than he was in the 80s? No. Game was different.
Yeah.
Dan Reeves was trying to run an offense that worked in the 60s and 70s, and Mike Shanahan was running an offense that was very modern. That's why Dan Reeves and Mike Shanahan didn't get along when Mike Shanahan was the offensive coordinator for the Broncos. So that's what it involves. It's just the game has changed.
Yep.
Like Elway in the shotgun all the time would have been phenomenal. That's why a lot of his best plays, if you actually watch highlights of John Elway, he's got a ton of great plays in the shotgun. If you watch the drive, it's almost exclusively in the shotgun. Why? Because that's what the 2-minute offense basically is. You know what I mean? Like, that's when you got in the shotgun back then. He wasn't in the shotgun the rest of the game. But look how good he was, not just as a thrower, but the scrambles, because then he could see running. Could you imagine if John Elway spent his whole career playing in the shotgun, like you see more of now? It's eras, and that's what makes guys like Dan Marino so unique, because he was putting up numbers that are like modern quarterback numbers in an era where nobody else was doing that, or very few people were doing that. So I think that's what I'll say this: late 80s to mid 90s was the best era of quarterback play, in my opinion. Mid 80s to mid 90s was the best era of quarterback play. There's so many great quarterbacks. But if somebody who's 23 went and looked at the numbers back then, like, dude, what are you talking about? Look at these numbers. Like, only like 2 guys threw for 4,000 yards. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, it's because it was a different era. But it's just it's why it's impossible to compare guys like that. Like, you'll hear people, oh, Larry Bird wouldn't be good in today's NBA. I'm like, you're nuts. Larry Bird was a better athlete than Luka Doncic. You know what I mean? And he killed the NBA back in the 80s. What would he do now? Like, look at what Luka's doing. You know what I mean? Like, Luka's a less athletic version of Larry Bird. And Larry scored the same, 28, 29 points a game he'd make 1 3-pointer a game because he didn't shoot the threes back then. Could have done it. He won 3 straight 3-point contests. He just wasn't a big part of his game except in big moments. So it's like, it's just so pointless. But I can't prove that. That's my opinion. I can't prove that. That's why I think it's kind of useless to compare eras when you're trying to say who was better. It's about how'd you dominate your era compared to how another guy dominated his era. It's more of what it's about.
100%.
Yeah.
Another one from Trev's Buy Sell Hold Glasses. USC fans are adamant that Gary Patterson is a home run hire at defensive coordinator. Is he, or is he a panic hire where they couldn't find anyone else?
I don't think it's either one of those things, to be honest with you. I don't think it's a home run. I don't think it's a panic hire either. There's a lot of coaches who would love to coach at USC, guys. Like, let's not act like nobody would have taken that job. Like, do I think there's a lot of coaches that the high level name guys that don't want to work with Lincoln Riley? I think there's probably a list of those guys, but this is more about Gary Patterson is a smart defensive guy, had a great reputation as a defensive coordinator, understands playing in an era or in a league where, he had to deal with a lot of high scoring offenses, which makes sense being a part of the USC team because of how Lincoln Riley runs his offense. And he's been in the game. I mean, he hasn't left the game. Like, he's been an analyst and he's been, all these things. So I don't think it was a panic hire. I don't think it was a home run either. I think it's somewhere in between. It's a solid hire that has potential to be better, but it's a short-term hire. You don't hire Gary Patterson to be your defensive coordinator for the next 10 years. You're hiring Gary Patterson because you've got about a 2-year window to get this thing figured out. You know what I mean? And he's being brought in to hopefully give you that boost to take you over the top. That's what he's being brought in to do. Will it work? I have no idea. But that's what this move was. I don't think it was either one of those things. Of course, USC fans feel that way. Notre Dame fans most of them would be saying that same thing on Twitter if Chris Ash left and they hired Gary Patterson. Yeah. A lot of Notre Dame fans would be saying the same thing. That's what fans do. You want to convince yourself that what your team just did would make sense. So you have reason to be optimistic. I get it. But it's not a home run hire, nor is it that.
Yeah.
Either.
It's a bridge hire. Ideally, the goal is to bring in somebody else younger on the defensive coaching staff and learn under Gary Patterson for a couple of years. It's the same thing that Michigan is doing with Kyle Whittingham. It's like he's not going to be their coach for the next decade. They're bringing him in to get him out of this kind of murky situation, not kind of, but this really bad situation. And then ideally you get somebody else on staff and groom under Kyle Whittingham for a little bit, and then they take over at some point. Like, that's what it is. I will say Whittingham is more of a home run hire as a head coach for Michigan in terms of what was available versus Gary Patterson for USC. He's closer to that, but yeah, it's more of a bridge hire in my opinion. Another one from Tavis McKay, BD and Trev. If you were forced into another position on the football team, one you never played, what would you hope it would be?
I actually did kind of have that happen to me, receiver. So I got moved to receiver for the last 3 games of my senior year of high school because I didn't get along well with the head football coach in our high school. And our season was basically over. My junior year, we went to the state semifinals, and then our coach left. And he took a D coordinator job at a high school down in Jacksonville, Florida. And so I followed him. I was going to go play for him, live down there in the spring, and got ruled ineligible because I wasn't going to live with my parents. I was 18. I was like, look, I'm 18. I'm going to, live by myself, and they wouldn't let me play. So I had to go back to Virginia. Well, we had a new coach. He didn't like me very much because, he didn't like our former head coach. And so he and I butted heads. And I've got some funny stories from those days too, Trev, that I'll have to share with you some days when I would just change plays in the middle of the game and they'd work and he'd get super mad at me, start yelling at me on the sidelines. So he moved me. He had this young kid at quarterback, good buddy of mine, great guy, Jonathan McDermott. And he moved Jonathan to quarterback and moved me to receiver. I think my first game, I had like 5 catches for like 80-something yards and played corner as well. And then the next game, I set a school record for touchdowns. I had 5 touchdowns, 4 receiving and a pick 6. I should have had 6. I had a ball that I jumped over a guy in the end zone, tipped it up, and caught it as I was falling down. You can see it on the video. I got both feet in bounds, and they ruled me incomplete, and somebody else scored the next play. So I should have had 6. I'm still a little pissed about that. So then I went to college to play quarterback. They moved me to receiver. So then I transferred to another school to play receiver. I'd given up on quarterback, and then they moved me to quarterback. So, so receiver, because it as a quarterback who's athletic, and I was then, that's the most natural transition to make because you know the offense, you know how to get open. You got to learn the technical parts of it. But if you're athletic, I was 6 foot, $185, and was, for that level of high school football, was pretty athletic, pretty fast. Although I did give up a 70-yard touchdown pass to Shenard Newby, who played at UVA. So I was playing a man-to-man, Trev, and they threw a go route, and I jumped up too early, and as I'm coming down, the ball hits off my hand right into Shenard's hands, and then I fall down, and he catches it and runs for a touchdown. I'm still pissed about that to this day because I had him locked down, but I just didn't time the jump well. But that's an easy transition for a guy who's an athletic quarterback because you understand the game from that level. And at the level of high school I was playing, which was not a very high level because I had transferred out of the public schools and I was in the private school. Back then, private school Virginia football was not great. I was just a better athlete than everybody else, so I could get away with it. So that's what was an easy transition to me. I went and played receiver and corner. What about you, Trev?
I would have loved to play defense.
Finally be the one that does the hitting.
Yeah, I loved contact. I requested it my junior and senior year also because our offensive line was putrid. I think I also set school records, Brian. No big deal. But probably for the most amount of time being sacked in a single game, dude. There was my senior year, I think I got sacked 9 times against Concord. 9 in a game. That was pretty great. We had a left guard that was 5'6", 150 pounds. That was pretty neat. But yeah, I would have been defense. I loved contact. I requested to go live in practice. One, because it's like I'm going to get hit in games. I would like for my first time getting hit this week is to not be on Friday night. I'd rather just be on Tuesday. Build up just a natural callus, I guess. But defense was fun. JV my sophomore year when I would play, I would play on defense too, and I'd either play safety or outside linebacker. The linebacker was so much fun. I would have gone back and done that if it were up to me if I could.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of the hitting part. I had no problem hitting people when I was running, but I didn't love tackling because I didn't start really playing defense until I played defense in the 8th grade, but I started at outside linebacker, rush the quarterback all the time, and I didn't play a ton. And then I never played defense again until my senior year of high school. So it just wasn't something I was comfortable with, I wasn't. Yeah. But I just went and covered people. But I remember first play of the game, we played Lynchburg Christian Academy, and they played on Liberty's Field, which back then was the old school turf. And I still have scars on my elbows. First play of the game, they're like a double tight, double wing option offense. So I got moved from corner inside, and we had basically went on a 5-3 defense, basically. 5-4 defense, and really, honestly. And first play of the game, they run a right around counter right to me, and I hit the running back, drive him into the ground, and I get up. I'm excited, and I go like this, and all of a sudden, just blood, just all the skin off of my arm, and it had sand in it. So I had to put my wristbands up over my elbows, and just blood dropping down my arm the whole rest of the game. I was like, man, this defensive crap is for the birds, man. You know what I mean? Like, this sucks. This is dumb. Why am I doing this? You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it wasn't for me. Wasn't for me. That's a fun question. Here we go. Let's see here.
From Bobby S., what freshman do you think will surprise the coaches during winter workouts? And same question for spring ball. Like, we knew they were good, but they may be even better than we thought.
Honestly, I don't know that there's any of those. I mean, this staff is extremely high on this team. There's not a lot of projects in this class. I think the only place where you might see that is on the offensive line, where maybe a guy is more ready as a freshman to play. That would be really it. I don't know that, like, on offense, there's anybody that they're going to be like, wow, I'm surprised how athletic Preston Frizzell is. You know, like,
yeah.
Defensively, I think the only one that might be that way is like maybe one of the linebackers or Nick Reddish, or like have a really big winter, because, you know, they're just guys that you consider as more down the line guys. But that's probably about it for me. I don't know that there's a whole. I mean, guys, this staff is extremely high on this class. So if guys are surprisingly better than they thought, that's going to be ridiculously good.
Yeah.
The standard is already pretty high.
I was about to say, like, honestly, with how good and how talented this class is, surprises might not even be a good thing. Like, honestly, looking at the makeup of this class and how well they evaluate talent and what they've brought in, I think this class will be what they thought it would be.
They are who we thought they were. This is an interesting one.
From Brandon Gilbert, outside of winning the game, what do y'all think would have been the butterfly effect of 1, Rockets punt return doesn't get called back; 2, the clock runs out on USC in 2005; or 3, Burchich catches the interception?
I don't know that Rockets. I don't know that Rockets would have done anything. I don't know that would have changed the outcome of that season, because I think all it would have done is that probably Georgia Tech just wins the title outright. Like, I think Notre Dame would have finished number 2 that year, because they finished 6th at 9-3. Miami finished 3rd, and then Colorado and Georgia Tech were 1 and 2 in the 2 polls. I think Colorado was 1 in the AP, and I think Georgia Tech won the coaches, or vice versa. I forget which one it was. I'm going to pull it up here real quick. I think Colorado was number 1 on the AP, number 2 in the coaches. Georgia Tech was number 1 in the coaches and number 2 in the AP. And of course, back then, Trev, you got a national championship for either one. That's what also happened in 97 with Michigan and Nebraska. I think Michigan won in the AP and Nebraska the coaches, or the other way around. I can't remember which one it was. But I don't think Notre Dame, even beating number 1 Colorado, would have jumped up to number 1. I think Georgia Tech would have won. Now, they would have passed Miami. Miami finished 3rd. They would have passed, because Notre Dame was 5th. They would have passed obviously Colorado, because they beat Colorado. I think they would have passed Colorado. The only other question is, would they have then passed Georgia Tech? And, you know, that, and I don't think that they would have. I think they would have passed Florida State. Florida State was actually, they wouldn't have passed them. They would have stayed ahead of them. Florida State leaped them. Florida State was number 6. Notre Dame was 5 going to the bowl game. And then Florida State beat number 7 Penn State in their bowl game. And that's what vaulted them ahead of Notre Dame, with Notre Dame losing. Now, maybe Florida State jumps ahead of Notre Dame because Notre Dame lost to Penn State that year, but Notre Dame with 2 losses doesn't leap ahead of an undefeated Georgia Tech team. Georgia Tech was like 11-0-1 that year. I think they would have I think they would have just won an outright national title under Bobby Ross. So that's what I think would have happened. So the other 2, I think Notre Dame, like, clock runs out on USC in 05. I think Notre Dame would have played for the national championship that year. I think they would have played Texas for the national championship. I don't think they would have won, but I think they would have played for the championship. So does that really change the trajectory of Charlie Weiss? No, I don't think so, because They were preseason number 1 or 2 the next year anyway. And I don't know that it changes anything. They had a great recruiting class that they signed anyway, so I don't know that next 3-year run of recruiting was excellent. I don't know if that would have changed a whole lot. The only one that I think would have changed anything is Pete Burstich catches that interception against Boston College. Notre Dame wins the title in 93.
Yeah.
That's the only one that would have really changed anything.
Yeah, I agree. There's some people that do forget that in 05, outside of the USC loss, they also lost to Michigan State at home in overtime too. I mean, there would have been less controversy over the Bush push, but I'm with you. Outside of that, it wouldn't have changed much for Weiss's outlook.
Like it would have changed the 2005 team's bowl game.
Yeah.
Like you said, like they were number 9 when they played USC. They'd have jumped into the top 5. They finished the year number 5 anyway, like going in the bowl game number 5 anyway. They would have been ahead of Ohio State. They would have been ahead of Penn State. I think they would have played Texas for the title. I just think the end result would have been the same. I think Texas would have beat Notre Dame probably a little bit more soundly than they beat USC. I think it would have been a very good game. Notre Dame could have scored on Texas a little bit, but I don't think Notre Dame had the horses on defense to stop Vince Young.
Yeah.
Agreed. Unfortunately. Good question. This is an interesting one.
Brian, from Trev's Buy-Sell-Hold Glasses. Brian, you have to pick one. You have a punching bag with Brian Kelly's face for yourself or a punching bag with Brian Van Gorder's face for Angela.
Can I have this? I would say a punching bag with BBG's face on it for Angela, because then I could still use it. That'd be great. Yeah.
Very, very well played. Let's say you each got your own punching bag. Over under on FanDuel. Who messes up their punching bag first?
Like messes it up like how?
Like gives it the work. Like who?
Oh.
Yeah.
That's this guy.
There we go.
Yeah.
Bobby S., if Keon Keeley is 265 pounds and in shape for fall camp, predict his stat line for a 12-game regular season.
Let's give that one a shot, Trev. You go first.
Well, if he's able to drop that much, possible. I'd be very interested to see if all of the weight is good weight, dropping 16 pounds in an off-season regime, possible. If I would predict, I would probably say he would have, because accounting in being rotating in, I'd give him in a 12-game regular season 30 tackles, 4 sacks, 6.5 tackles for a loss. Probably where I'd be roughly off the top of my head.
How many tackles for loss?
6.5 tackles for
a
loss.
4 sacks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. I could see those numbers going up a little bit. Because you're talking regular season, right? We're talking regular season because he said 12-game regular season. Maybe add 1 to each, and that's the range.
Yeah.
I think where you said, and then 8 to 8.5 tackles for loss and 5-6 sacks would be the range for him, is if that's the case. Like the maxed out range. And then the key for Keon this year is get yourself on the right track, be a really good rotation guy, impactful rotation guy. And then next year you cap things off with the monster year. You really take that big jump next year. That would be where I would go.
Yep. Brandon Gilbert, if you could create your own 10-team conference, who would be in it and why?
This is one, Trev. I've actually been asked this before, and I'm going to give my answer because it's kind of fun to do. Like, what would you do if Notre Dame had to start their own conference? So number one, as I said, first of all, I wouldn't start a conference. I would start an association of schools, an association of independent schools. So I am very much against Notre Dame being in a conference. I don't want a conference. I want them to be independent. Do I think, however, that there could be some value to Notre Dame, taking some old independent teams and saying, "Hey, we're gonna go back to being independent, but we're going to be in sort of a association together. We have some bowl tie-ins, we have some TV contracts, but we're technically not a conference. You can schedule however you want. We're going to, we like to schedule within each other, but you don't have to play all 9 teams. We would like to. And a lot of those games would be played against each other, but you could have the freedom to do other things. It's very easy. It's basically the old Big East and Independence merged together. It's Notre Dame, Penn State, Miami, Florida State, Syracuse, West Virginia, Rutgers, Boston College, Pitt, and UConn. And then from that, Notre Dame plays Miami every year, Syracuse every year, Boston College every year, Pitt every year, and UConn every year. I'd play those 5 teams every year. And then I'd mix in the other teams as part of that. I'd play Florida State maybe 4 times out of 10 years. I would say maybe I always have one of Penn State or Florida State on my schedule in some sort of rotation. And I'd have Navy. You'd want to try to get, USC back on there, but that's what I would do. But it would be an association of independent teams, not a conference. Our winner we wouldn't have a league winner. We wouldn't have an automatic bid. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I view it. What say you, Trevor?
Nice. I like it. I would make similar to an affiliation, but I would do it with just blue bloods. And I would change the number to 9, and then every team in that affiliation would have to play 3 blue bloods a year. I think that'd be great for the sport. Think of some of the matchups that you would get. You'd get, every couple of years, Notre Dame and Oklahoma. You would get like Ohio State and, Bama every couple of years. I'd make some sort of blue blood affiliation like that. I think that would be cool. It's probably where I would be with it.
Let's go here.
Mark Avalone, is the new football constructor on schedule to complete on time?
Yeah, I believe so. The construction for the new football facility, I believe that's on pace to open when they said it was. I'll have to check in on that, but I haven't heard anything.
It's supposed to be 27, right?
I thought it was sometime this year. I believe it was supposed to be. I'll look into that. I haven't heard from anything. I know somebody can text right now. So give me 1 second. Let me see. Any idea if the new facility?
Shoot, man, with how quick everything was going up, just the difference that we saw. When we would go in person to practices, the difference between spring and fall camp.
Yeah.
They're putting it up. Johnny from the boot, out of the 2 incoming freshman quarterbacks, which played in a more complex system that may prepare them for Notre Dame's offense?
Well, that's actually Noah Grubbs. Noah Grubbs is played in a more complex offense and played longer. Teddy Gerard reclassified and played in a different offense the last 2 years. So just between those two, if granting the premise that the system helps him be more ready to play at Notre Dame, which I don't necessarily believe that to be true. I think a kid who maybe doesn't play in a very complex offense but's wicked smart football player is going to pick that stuff up just as quickly.
Yeah.
But just looking at the question for what it is, that Noah Grubbs played in the more complex offense against, in my opinion, for the most part, better competition consistently, like for 3 years. Teddy played against very good competition this year. That's partly why he went to North Cobb. He wanted to play against better competition as opposed to North Cobb Christian. But that's still Leonard. That's still, Noah Grubbs. I was looking at the next question. That's why.
No worries. From Bobby S. Will Leonard Moore go down as the best corner in Notre Dame history if he has a dominant junior year? I think he will be.
I have no idea. Do I think he has a chance to be the best cornerback of the last 15, 20 years? Absolutely. Is he going to be better than Todd Light? Is he going to be better than wasn't Luther Bradley a corner? Like, how do I compare him to people from the 70s and 60s? Like, it's just, go ahead, Trevor.
I was just about to say this goes back to the comparing eras question that we got earlier. It's just impossible. We had a question. I think Sean and I had a buy-sell hold on Monday about, will this defense be the best in Notre Dame history? And it's like, look, the 1966 defense held a team to 38 total points, but the game was played completely different back then. It doesn't take away from how impressive it is. It's just
they gave up that year, Trev. They gave up 3.6? Because we've been asked this question before. Will the Notre Dame defense have a chance to be best in history? Like, no, it won't. Like, do you understand like how the game used to be played? Like it's hard to evaluate that. 1966, Notre Dame gave up 3.8 points per game and did not lead the nation in scoring. Now their offense was first in the nation at 36.2 points per game. If you looked at this year and 36.2 points per game would rank the Notre Dame defense 13 or Notre Dame offense 13th in college football. They led the nation that year.
Yeah.
And defensively, if you look nationally, the best scoring defense last year, Ohio State gave up 9.3 points per game. That's almost like you'd almost have to triple what that team did. Like if you doubled it, you're still almost 2 points lower than what Ohio State did. Like it's just such a different era. It really is. And so I know this is what sports fans love to do. Who's the greatest of all time? I have no clue. Nor do I think it matters. There's very few sports where I think you can, or positions where I think you can clearly define that's the greatest. Very few. I think you can say, in my opinion, but even this would get debated. I think you can absolutely say that the best wide receiver ever is Jerry Rice. But I know people that would debate that. You know, is Michael Jordan the best basketball player ever? I know a lot of people think that, but how do you compare Jordan to Bill Russell? I mean, well, what's about championships? That's why he's better than Bird. Okay, cool. Bill Russell won 11. You know, well, but all right, exactly. But insert reason why it's different then than it is now. The game is, I just don't love making those. There was a time when I think most people considered Wayne Gretzky the best hockey player ever, but I don't know if that's still true. And I couldn't tell you why. I think he scored the most goals. I mean, I just don't follow hockey, but I get those kind of arguments just really don't interest me because it's impossible to tell. Well, how would John Elway have been if he would have been, traded to the Niners instead of I have no idea.
Yeah.
Maybe he'd have been better. Maybe he would have won all those Super Bowls. Maybe he'd have been worse because he wasn't a fit for the West Coast offense. I don't know. I tend to think like, could you imagine John Elway with, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There was and he finally got confirmed in the Elway thing on Netflix, which I was happy to hear this, but they confirmed, Adam Schefter confirmed that Dan Reeves had worked out a trade to the Redskins. You remember how good the Redskins were in the early 90s with like Mark Rippon at quarterback? Could you imagine if they had John Elway at quarterback in the late 80s and early 90s?
Sure.
But who knows? Who knows? So what I can tell you is I think Leonard Moore, if he continues to do next year what he did this year and stays healthy, he'll be the best Notre Dame cornerback of the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's as far back as is relevant in my opinion.
Agreed. The only sports that it's worth having those conversations aren't like some of the big three that people like to talk about: football, basketball, baseball. It's like swimming, golf. I mean, even tennis, and then even in sports like that, sports technology has to play.
When competition, you'll hear people. You'll hear people. Remember yesterday we were talking about we couldn't say word.
Yeah.
You will hear people say like, "Well, Jack Nicklaus didn't play against the greatest competition," and then some older person will go, well, "What are you talking about? He played Arnold Palmer, Lee Trevino, Frick." And then you'll hear people say that about Tiger. Well, Tiger didn't play against him, and then you hear people of that era. So, well, no, what are you talking about? He played against Phil Mickelson. Like you said, it's not about, did this guy shoot better scores or, have better scores in golf than somebody did. Well, the courses are different. Technology is different. It's how did you dominate your era? You know what I mean? And Wimbledon or tennis is another one. Like you could say this person has more grand slams than so-and-so person, but then you're like, okay, yeah, but this person played in an era where she was just so much better than everybody else, not because she was so great, but because the era just wasn't as strong.
Yeah.
Like how many Wimbledons would Steffi Graf have won, or how many Grand Slams would Steffi Graf have won if she didn't overlap with like Martina Navratilova, Chris Everett, Monica, you know what I mean? Like there were some all-time great, like, and people say, well, Serena is the greatest of all time. And other people say, well, Steffi is. And then you get these arguments of the eras. And I'm like, how can you compare the era Steffi Graf played into to Serena? How can you truly compare them? It's all subjective, and you're an older person, so you have a fondness of that era, and you have more of a fondness of what Serena's done. How do you really settle it? Well, this person won more Grand Slams. Well, okay, but again, that doesn't answer the question. You know what I mean? Because it's if you were playing against significantly better competition, then you probably who's to say that if the Celtics were from 1984 to 1989 were transported in that era from the 80s to the 90s, would they have won as many rings as the Bulls because they didn't have to face Magic and Worthy and Kareem? I don't know. As a Celtics fan, I'd say yes, but I don't know. Would the Bulls, if you'd have put them in the 80s, won 6 championships? Maybe. I think not. But it's a different era. The Bulls roster in the late 90s would have looked different in the 80s because there was more teams.
Yeah.
You know, so it's so impossible to have those conversations. I just feel like let's just enjoy the greatness for what it is. He's the best cornerback in college football, and he's the best cornerback in Notre Dame in recent history, which is saying something because they've had some pretty darn good flipping corners. But best of all time, I have no idea. How do you gauge that? Well, he had X number of picks. So they didn't throw the ball that much back. You know, it's so impossible to compare those type of eras. It really is. It really is.
Agreed.
So, and no, Anna Kournikova was not a great tennis player. She just was an attractive tennis player. So, greatest tennis power couple ever, however, is a no-brainer. It's Steffi Graf and Andre Agassi.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they were both, but like that's another one. How would Pete Sampson have been if he didn't have to go against Andre Agassi and some of those greats? How would Rafael Nadal and who's the other guy? Roger Federer, what would their careers look like if they weren't playing against each other for so long of their, you know what I mean? Like there's all those debates, and I just at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. You know, like what matters is how great will he be in 2026? That's all that really matters. It's a fun debate for some. I just think it's kind of not pointless because it's sports. We love to talk about those things. It's unprovable, I guess, is really the way that I would look at it.
That's fair.
So. Like if Leonard Morley has only 1 interception this year, does that mean he wasn't as good as, Benjamin Morrison or Julian Love or somebody else that maybe had more picks? No.
I mean, I would argue he's already been the best cornerback in my lifetime at Notre Dame, and that's before he does anything in 26. But again,
I think that's a fair thing to say, Trev, because of Benjamin Morrison couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah.
Like if Benjamin would have been healthy all of last year, then the standard would be different than it is now. But yeah, I mean, of the last 20 years, who's the other one? Julian Love. He was pretty good, but he's not as good as Leonard Moore. But who's not part of your type? Todd Light. Who's not part of my greatest DB ever debate? Luther Bradley. Who's not part of my greatest defensive end debate? Ross Browner, who Lou Samoji would have told you was absolutely the best defensive lineman ever played Notre Dame. He was done in Notre Dame before I was born. So how can I even, that's the thing. It's fun to discuss in certain situations, but here's what I know. He's the best corner in college football, and hopefully that helps his 2016 become the latest Notre Dame national champion. That's kind of where I'm at.
For sure. Getting into part 3 of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It's the Friday free-for-all mailbag, and we have Joseph Parr kicking us off here in part 3. I've been noticing it looks like a lot more highly rated receivers for the 2027 class are showing serious interest in Notre Dame. Which ones do you feel Notre Dame is in the best place with?
I mean, obviously Julius Jones Jr., they have a legitimate shot at. Quentin Burrell, they have a legitimate shot at. The Xavier Sabb, they have a legitimate shot at. Travis Fryman, if they push for him, they'd have a legitimate shot at. I'm looking at the offer list right now. There's some other guys that I think they have a shot at. They recently offered at Easton Royal. That's a big one. He's talked about wanting to play. He's committed to Texas, but he's committed in that's their current placeholder. But he plans on taking visits. He might take a visit to Notre Dame. Do they have a shot there? I don't know. I mean, they're a long way to go for that one, but he's a very talented player. But the guys that I mentioned are the ones that right now I think they have the best shot at to to potentially land. And look, there's two reasons why. Number one is CJ Carr, from the standpoint of having CJ Carr has shown that you can have a legit passing game, and then also Teddy Gerard. I mean, that's really the primary reason that Easton Royal's looking at Notre Dame is Teddy Gerard. So, but Burrell and Julius Jones and Sabb are still top of my most likely. Travis Fryman at the top of my most likely list as of now, but it's still very early. Very early.
Heard that. From John Leahy, winter Olympic sport you think you'd be the best at?
I have no idea. My wife's a snowboarder. She likes to snowboard. She actually did ski patrol on a snowboard out at, I think, Big Bear out in California, or maybe it was Utah, I forget. But she was ski patrol for a while. I'm not good with things on my feet, Trev. I've said this before. I don't do well on skates. I don't do well on skis. I don't do well on surfboards. I went off my buddy Mark Beers in high school one time. He'd surfed, and I grew up in Ohio, dude. I don't want to surf. But I went out with him one time, and I mean, we were out there a couple hours, and I didn't get up once. Just not once. Just, I don't know what it is, man. You put anything other than sneakers or cleats on me, and I just lose coordination. So I don't know. Somebody in the chat earlier said curling. Sure. I don't know. Like
curling's electric, bro.
Yeah. Curling is I'm not sure, bro. I don't know what I'd be good at. I don't think I'd be good at any of those things.
I was about to say I can only tell you which ones I wouldn't be good at. I couldn't tell you which ones I'd be good at. Yeah.
We'll see. But I didn't realize it was getting ready to start.
Yeah, I'm more of a Summer Olympics person than a Winter Olympics, but I will say I would never be able to do it. Watching the figure skating is crazy.
Oh my God.
What they're able to do is nuts.
Yeah, dude, I like pull muscles and sprain my ankle just watching them. Like, it's wild. Yeah, very wild. Great appreciation for. It's kind of like gymnasts. Somebody, it was the what was it? I forget that girl's name, but she did the Michael Jackson thing a couple years ago. I think her last name was like Oshani or something like that. I forget what her name was, but she did this like dance / floor routine in gymnastics, and she's like hitting the ground, splitting, coming. I'm like, good Lord, like just the athleticism that it takes to do those kind of things. You greatly appreciate. And
did you hear about Lindsey Vonn?
She tore ACL and she's still going to compete. Yeah, that's like she's an athlete, dude.
That is nuts. I tore my ACL and didn't get out of bed for a week.
Yeah,
like,
and she's dealt with so many different injuries. Like, she kind of has learned to be able to still compete at a high level while not 100%, which all elite athletes have to do to some degree. Some have to unfortunately learn that lesson a little tougher than others. And Lindsey Vonn has certainly had to be one of those.
From B Straw 1594, now that we know the sites of the quarterfinals, which bowl game do you think Notre Dame would pick if they are the number 1 seed going into the playoffs?
Well, so the quarterfinals this year, I pulled up the article that I wrote the other day. Of course, it is. There we go. Okay. So the quarterfinals this year are the Fiesta Bowl, the Goodyear Cotton Bowl, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, and the Rose Bowl. My guess, Trevor, would be that they would want to do the Cotton Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl, but I think part of that would probably, I would think that would probably be it. I don't think they'd want to be in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta against a potential SEC opponent.
Yeah.
Maybe the Rose Bowl. There's a lot of Notre Dame fans in California. I mean, I'm not sure which one of those three they would want to compete against. I would imagine with the type of team Notre Dame has that there'd be an attractiveness to playing indoors, which would lead to either the Fiesta Bowl, because that's a retractable roof, or the Cotton Bowl, which is just flat out indoors. That'd be my guess. And the other thing too is you're trying to recruit Texas heavily, and that wouldn't be a bad thing to, play a playoff game down in Texas. I'm not sure which one of those four. I could see them making a case for any of them except the Peach Bowl. I mean, and the Peach Bowl is the closest one. But again, I don't know that Notre Dame would necessarily want to potentially play an SEC team in there. Now, I don't know how it works, like when they would choose, is like, do they choose after the bracket comes out?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
and then let's say that they're the number 1 seed and the 8-9 is like a Big 10 team, the Big 12 team, then I would not necessarily be opposed to the Peach Bowl. Right. I just don't necessarily want to play LSU in round 2 in the Peach Bowl. You know what I mean? But playing them in the Cotton Bowl wouldn't be a whole lot better either because, they're kind of right in the middle between the two. But I'm not sure. It's a good question. But I just think logically I would think Texas or Arizona would make the most sense.
I was going to say Cotton or Fiesta.
It would be pretty sweet, though, to watch Notre Dame in the real Rose Bowl.
Heck yeah.
We watched them in the Rose Bowl in Texas, just lame. But after watching the Indiana-Alabama game, you do run the risk. It is still December and January, you know what I mean? And you do run the risk of the weather not being the greatest in Southern California, which we saw this year. But, yeah, it's a good question. I would hope that it'd be the Texas or the Fiesta Bowl or the Cotton Bowl. I think would be probably my pick, but I don't know that Notre Dame would choose to play outdoors, which kind of sounds crazy when you think about what their offense is going to be like. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. Caitlin Otani, thanks guys. That's who it was. That's a little bit of a different question here.
From Pete Weber, Brian and Trev, what's your go-to date night spots with the missus?
It depends on what kind of date night we're going to have. I mean, sometimes we'll go to a movie. We like to go to the movies like when they're like on weird times, like at noon.
Oh, heck yeah.
We're like the only ones there. We've been to so many dates, and I like to joke, like, I rented the whole place out for you, sweetheart, but yeah, movie sometimes, it just depends on what we're trying to do. Sometimes if we're just trying to be, not spend a lot of money, we'll go to Texas Roadhouse and, nice little date night out. But sometimes we'll it's during the summer, we've talked about wanting to do more outdoors things. We'll go to South Bend Cubs games on date night sometimes, we'll go a couple of those, just fun. And then sometimes real special date nights, we'll go to Ruth's Chris, which is nice because I know how to game the system. I joke with Trev about this all the time. I have not paid to go to Ruth's Chris in years. My wife and I go every couple months to Ruth's Chris just because I exchange our credit card points for gift cards and do it that way because I can't afford to go to Ruth's Chris on my own. So, but we'll do that on special occasions when we have enough gift card money to go. So, because I'm still ghetto Trev. You know what I mean? So still pinching pennies whenever I can. But those are some of ours. Just depends. Every situation is different, right? There's not one spot.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of times for date nights, I'll cook at home. And she likes that. Especially Italian, because there's not a lot of great Italian options that I know of in South Bend. And so if she wants a really good Italian, we'll usually go eat at home. But actually the one place we do like that serves Italian, Papa Vino's is pretty good. She gets something called a zoodle something, and then I get the manicotti, which she pronounces way differently than I do. As an Italian girl, it's like manigoat or something. I'm like, honey, I see no G in manicotti. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Honestly, and this isn't me trying to be the good husband. It's just, I'm not a picky person. And so our date nights are just kind of whatever she's feeling. It's with how busy we both are and how much we love to do with our friends, our date nights are just kind of whenever we get to do stuff together. So it's, we don't have date nights to the store, but if I cook us some food and we sit down and watch a movie together, that's date night, It's kind of like that.
Somebody in the chat said, wherever they want to go, trick question. Sort of. I didn't marry a woman who is an overly decisive when it comes to where she wants to go. So she normally likes me to pick those things. And so nights when I'm not in a mood to go out lead to some tense conversations sometimes. I just want you to pick. I'm like, I'm not asking you to pick, honey. I just want to know if there's a specific type of food that you might be in the mood for. She says, well, I could do this and I could do that. So you just named literally all 5 different potential options, sweetheart. Like, you didn't actually help me. You actually made this worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My go-to is whenever we have date night and I don't know where to go, I'll just talk to her. I'm like, guess where I'm taking you tonight? And then she'll just name a restaurant. And I'm like, yep.
Yep.
And then we go
That's
there.
smart. That's a good one. It's a good one, Trev. I have to try that one of these times.
But
then if she says something like expensive that requires a reservation, I'm like, no.
Yeah. See, I would have, but it was so annoying. Called the hostess stand. They were booked. How crazy is that? But guess where I am taking you, though?
Yeah.
Like, that's just...
Guess where else I'm taking you? Crap. 0 for 2. This isn't going well. All right, honey. We're just going to go McDonald's. All right, fine. It's just, we're not going to play this game tonight. That's funny. It's good stuff.
Super chat from UT Irish. Appreciate you. IB, get together for the Provo game. I live 25 minutes away.
Yeah. So possibly. It just depends partly on when the game is going to be played. I've already booked my flight and hotel for that game. So
bang,
I'm already set. But I'm not sure what time I get in. But yeah, we'll probably try to maybe look into doing something. Just depends on what time kickoff is going to be for that game.
Super chat from Tyler Evans. Appreciate you, man. Rank the Power 4 commissioners by incompetence.
Number 1, Jim Phillips.
Yep.
Number 2, honestly, I'm going to say Tony Petitti, because I think he gets a lot of credit for success of the Big Ten right now that I don't think he built. And I think he's doing things that are going to hurt the league. Just really, and I'm just not a big Tony Petitti fan. Then Brett Yormark is number 3, and then Greg Sankey would be number 4. I don't think Greg Sankey is incompetent. I think he's very effective. I don't know, like a lot of things he's championing, but I think he's very effective at what he does. So too effective in some ways, if we're being completely honest, Trev.
Yeah, that's fair. My answer was going to be simple. Jim Phillips at 1 and a 3-way tie for 2nd, but I agree with what you're saying. My comment was a little just bit more petty.
What was that?
That was it. Jim Phillips is in 1st, and it's a 3-way tie for 2nd.
that would be a good answer. That would be a very good answer.
From Salty, will all new coaches and transfer players be present for the spring camp?
All the coaches will be. Still don't know the answer on all the players. Waiting to hear back from some people about the players. Let's see if I got an email on that yet. I have reached out. I was under the impression that there's a chance that DJ McKinney won't be here in the spring, but I'm not 100% certain of that. I'm still trying to find that out. I mean, the only ones, I've seen Mylan Graham in the videos, and I've seen Keon Keeley in the videos. I've seen Tion Gray in the videos. I've seen Francis Brew in the videos. So, and I've seen Jaden Sanders in the videos. So those 5 I can say for sure. I don't know that I've seen Quincy Porter in the videos, but that's also because he's still coming back from an injury. You know, he may. So I think making decisions off of who's hurt or not, or who's here or not, based on those practice videos is unwise. All I'm simply doing is saying, well, I have seen them, so they're clearly on campus right now and able to work out. So the others, I'm not sure of. We'll see. All right. Let's see here. Got that one. Okay, here's a good one from Pete Weber.
With the personnel expected in 2026, what base package, defense, and coverage scheme do you expect Chris Ash to run? And what sub-packages or personnel changes do you see him employing to mix it up?
I don't think it's going to look a whole lot different than this year, Trev. I think they're going to be a base 4-2-5 team that will have a mix-up of some nickel and dime packages where maybe you take a defensive lineman off the field and put in a third linebacker. There'll be some packages where they put a third safety on the field like we saw this year. There'll be some, because we did see that this year where they would have Tay, Adon, and Luke Talich all on the field together at a time. We'll see some of that. I think we could see some, bigger corner packages. So I don't think the package wise, it's going to look a whole lot different than it did last year. As far as coverage structure, I honestly, that's the big question. That's kind of the thing we keep talking about. They will run man. They will run cover 1. They will run cover 2, some cover 2. They'll run some cover 3. They'll run some quarters a little bit. They'll do like some pattern match stuff. It looks like to me that they do some of that. They'll do some sim pressure stuff. They'll they're going to do a lot of the same stuff they did last year. The question is, what will be the emphasis of those things?
Yeah.
And nowadays it's hard to say, well, they're running cover 3 or the cover, because there's so many combo coverages now where they're running 2 to this boundary, but something else in the field, or, that's a part of it too, is it's just not as easy to say, what do you run? We run 0, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, you only run 4 coverages. Well, no, we actually have 25 coverages, but those are the, you know what I mean? But those are what people know. So I think that's, it's just, the question is going to be, what percentage of those things do we see compared to last year? But those things won't change a whole lot as far as just the base of what we saw last year.
Same page here. The only thing that I hope for, Pete, in this one is I hope that they don't do drop cover 4 and drop to 15 and drop to 15 yards of depth at 3rd and 6.
Ever.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to see that. I don't care if it's 3rd and 20. Don't ever want to see that.
From Bobby S., with all the reps Matt and Framo will get this spring, can he compete for the starting will until KVA is back healthy? I know he's a Mike, but he's also a freak and may have a chance to win the will job.
I don't see that.
I
don't see that.
Yeah, let's not forget about Jaden Osbury, who started at will last season.
Right.
Over guys like Kingston when he was healthy, and Jalen Sneed, who's a vet, and Madden Framo, who's still freaky talented.
Yeah. Kingston Villamasa did not start for Notre Dame this year. The only games he started were games where they played 3 linebackers against 12 personnel or option teams.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody realizes that. Kingston Villamasa did not start at linebacker for Notre Dame last year. Now, I don't think that matters, because if he didn't get hurt, he would have had more snaps than Jaden Osbury. But that's because he's not only plays Mike and Will, but also is part of the sub package.
Yep.
So I don't think we need to worry too much about who starts or who doesn't start. But the reality is I don't see him beating out Jaden Osbury and Jalen Sneed. It's not like Kingston's hurt, and so now there's this wide open competition for Will that Madden's going to go take. Matt's a heck of a player, no doubt, but I just don't see him passing up Jaden Osbury and Jalen Sneed or Drake Bowen anytime soon. That doesn't mean he's not a heck of a player. Just like Drake Bowen didn't beat out JD Bertrand. His time will come. And I expect Madden to play a lot more this year. I do expect that. I do think he'll get on the field more. But I don't see him start. Now, and if he does, and it's not related to injury, then shoot, boy, until KVA gets back. Put it like this: if he's good enough to beat out Jaden Osbury and Jalen Sneed, then I don't know that Kingston coming back off of a knee injury is going to all of a sudden mean, sorry, Madden, head to the bench. If he's good enough to beat those 2 guys out, he's just their starting will.
Yeah.
I mean, there is no until so-and-so, because Kingston won't be the same exact athlete post-injury right away that he was pre-injury.
Right.
He'll still be a very good athlete, but a lot of times it's the year after that people will say that that's the case. How true that is, I think it varies from player to player. Some come back immediately right away. Some do need that extra time to come back. And I've always found the bigger you are, the more you need that. But we'll see. We'll see. This is a very interesting one.
From Johnny from the Boot, if you were in the woods of, I'm going to butcher this. Bastogne, thank you. And you could only choose one, would you choose a coat, a pair of socks, or a blanket?
Well, I feel like a coat and a blanket are kind of the same thing. So surprisingly, I've read some stuff that this is World War II, Trev. That one of the issues that caused a lot of problems, a lot of amputations, a lot of death were guys not having socks and just not having proper foot. So if I could choose an extra pair of one of those, I'd probably go extra pair of socks, because there's things in nature you can kind of get to keep warm. You can start a fire. You can take brush and put over top of you. I mean, there's things you can do to try to keep somewhat warm in those situations. But when your feet get cold, bruh, and they're wet, there's not a whole lot you can do. So it's going to sound crazy, but I'd probably say an extra pair of socks would be a welcome thing.
Yeah. I probably would too. Plus, if I wasn't alone in those woods, I'd probably ask to borrow somebody else's blanket or their coat if they weren't using one of those. I'm not asking to borrow somebody's socks.
Let's snuggle. Just made it weird.
From Trev's Buy Sell Hold Glasses, I know Notre Dame does really good with vetting coaches before announcing hires. Is there any concern with John Mary being associated with the Sharon Moore staff?
No. Look, I know Tony Alford, who was on that staff. That's one of the best people I know in the business. Like, what that man chose to do in his personal life has nothing to do with the assistants around him. And clearly there were some coaches that were bringing up some things that were going on to leaders at Michigan, and they chose to do nothing about it. So, no. What I didn't like was when Biff Poggi was acting kind of like, self-righteous about it. That bothered me. But no, I don't have any concern there.
Yeah.
Just like I would only have concern if I had credible reason to be concerned. Like, hey, I found out that, did you know that he and Sharon hung out all the time? Like, they were really tight. I'd be like, then I'm gonna have to question that guy.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence of that with him from what I've heard. So, yep. Speaking of Hall of Fame, here's a good one.
From Bobby S. Does Zach get in first ballot, and do you see Q making the Hall?
With Zach, definitely, I think he should be first ballot Hall of Famer. He's arguably one of the greatest. He certainly, I think, would win the debate of who's the greatest guard of this generation. I think that's, like, I don't know how much of a debate that is. But yeah, he's one of the best guards to ever play the game.
And one of the only other people that might be able to contest him for that, depending on how his career finishes, is Quentin Nelson.
And that was going to be my second part. With Quentin is, I don't know the answer to that. He's got a lot more to prove because from reading things, again, I don't watch NFL. Quentin started off incredibly well. All pro 18, 19, 20, 21. Didn't make all pro in 22 and 23. The last 2 years he's made second team all pro. Is he as dominant as he was early in his career? I don't know. I haven't watched that, but he's going to need another burst of 4 or 5 more years of that level of dominance to be considered a guy that's a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. But he's on the way. He's been in the NFL since 2018, and he's made the Pro Bowl every year. He's been an All-Pro all but 2 years. So 6 out of his 8 years, he's been an All-Pro. So he's on his way, Trev. I'll say that. He's on his way, but he just needs another 5 to 6 years of just pure dominance, because that's what Zach did up until his, the very end. He was just so good. Same with Harrison Smith. I think the most likely Hall of Famer right now amongst Notre Dame players is Harrison Smith.
Yeah,
my personal opinion.
Yeah, he's definitely up there. I think Zach's going to be a first ballot. I do think Quentin Nelson's going to make it. It's just how he finishes his career will determine if he makes a push for a first ballot or not. But I think he's definitely in.
Yep.
From John Leahy, was there a player in 2026 recruiting class that you wish Notre Dame could have got?
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking perfect class, yeah, there's a couple guys. I mean, I'm set at running back, I'm set at tight end, but there was a couple receivers. I was a big Naeem Burrows fan, Trev, like big Naeem Burrows. I loved the Cohen Brown kid that went to Texas. I think he was really good. But like a bigger bodied guy would have been nice. I mean, there were some of those guys. Notre Dame wasn't necessarily like in on any of those guys, like except for what's the kid's name that went to Clemson? Let me find him real quick. Connor Solomon, a Gordon Seller, something like that. Big, tall, vertical guy. Maybe something like that would have been nice to have. And then I would have liked another defensive lineman. I loved Dre Quinn. He was a guy, but the guy that if you could go back and do it all over again, who's the one player that you'd say you could give the Notre Dame that they didn't get? It'd probably either be Kari Wilder or Jamion Winfield. Kari Wilder's a kid going to Ohio State. He's a stud. I think he eventually transitions to D tackle. And Jamion Winfield is a D tackle that is a really, really stud player. They did want a third D tackle in this class. And I think one of those two guys would have just been man, chef's kiss, cherry on top, whatever you want to call it, would have been excellent.
The only other one that I would add would be like a second true safety, because I don't know if Nick Reddish is going to be
And I
like
don't
a
think
field
he
or boundary
will.
safety. Yeah.
And I didn't love the safeties in this class. Maybe like a Zach Fort. I mean, like the Edwards kid going to Bama, he's a heck of a player, but Notre Dame was never a player for him. Like I'm talking like people they had a legitimate chance to get.
Sure.
Braylon Womack didn't have the grades to get into Notre Dame. That was his issue. Jet Washington, I don't know that he's a safety. He may end up being a receiver. Zach Ford, I liked. That'd be probably the most realistic guy that they could have maybe got. Trev would have been him as that.
Sure.
To answer your question, as that second safety kind of kid.
From Dirtbag Jake, how soon after you started the message board does it require someone to be an OG?
I mean, I kind of look at it as like the guys that were on there like that first year. And there's levels to the original OGs. Like my buddy Matt Dunbar, he was literally the first person to sign up. He was my guinea pig to see if the sign up process was working. You know what I mean? And but it's those people that signed up like that first year and have stayed. But anybody that really joined in 21 and 22, I kind of considered some level to be an OG. Like Raymond Harton said, I didn't join until 2022. I'm not an OG. I think we can kind of give you comp OG status, man. You've been very loyal to us and you were there kind of within that first year of it. But yeah, this June, I believe, or this July, Trev, will be the 5-year anniversary when we launch the message board. Yeah. This will be awesome.
That's sick.
Yep.
From the history expert, are we perhaps putting too much on Charlie Partridge solving all the questions concerning the defense? Pressure will help the secondary. Coach will turn everyone D-line into an All-American, etc.
We literally never said that. We never said he's going to turn everyone into a defensive lineman. We said there's going to be one guy like that this year. That's Boubacar. Asking Bryce Young to make another jump as a junior is not asking him to do something. Like if he can't get that out of Bryce Young, then he's just not a great defensive line coach. So no, I think that I don't honestly pressure will help secondary. Duh, that's football. That's not Charlie. That's not. And we said yesterday that's not on Charlie Partridge. That's on Chris Ash. So with all due respect, I don't think that you're representing what we said well from yesterday. I thought I made pretty clear that the pressure and this and that is not up to Charlie Partridge or Aaron Henry. It's up to Chris Ash. And the questions that we had yesterday are not these dramatic, like, gee, I don't know if this guy who's never played is going to step in. Like if we were sitting there saying like the success of the season is going to be on Chris Ash's ability to turn Logan Thomas into an All-American, then I'd say, yeah, you probably got a point there. But we're asking a guy who had 10 sacks and 10 tackles for loss and 6.5 sacks in 11 games to turn him into an All-American. It's not exactly a stretch, in my opinion. We're asking that Bryce Young, who only had 2 fewer pressures than the guy we're talking about, to have that big year 3 jump to become a more consistent player. That's what good coaches do. As guys get older, they become more consistent and more effective. Same thing with Keon. I don't think it stretches to ask that. So no, I don't think we are putting too much on Charlie Partridge, and nor did we ever say he's supposed to solve all the questions on defense. I just find that to be a very poor representation of what we said yesterday.
Agreed.
He's got to address a lot of things about the D-line because that's his freaking job. He's the D-line coach, and he's very good at it. So yeah, I expect him to do things to help maximize the talent of the players in the defensive line. Yes, that is absolutely what he should be doing, and I don't think it's put too much on him to do that.
No, it's definitely not. Notre Dame is not favorites on FanDuel to win the national championship because they hired Charlie Partridge, nor should that be the burden that he's been given when he takes over full-time, especially once spring comes. Like that's not the reality of the situation. I'm with you, bro.
We literally did a D-end preview yesterday, so clearly Charlie Partridge is going to have a big say in how good that unit is. That's why you hire coaches and pay them 6-7 figures.
Yes.
You don't pay them that kind of money to babysit, shoot dice with them. You know what I mean? Play cards with them. You teach them to coach them and get the most out of their ability. But what we said is the talent is elite. We made the comparison of like, remember when it was like the freshmen coming in were like Kurt Heinisch and Myron Tungavolo-Amosa, and they had to play on those teams? Well, now it's guys like Tiki Hole and Elijah Golden are going to have trouble sniffing the field this year. So, no, I don't think it's too much to ask at all.
Agreed.
I think that's why you pay guys.
From Brandon Rouse, BD, do you think without Love and Price, Notre Dame's offense would be better if they went to 11 personnel more?
That's a great question, Brandon. I don't know that the loss of those two backs is the reason that I think we'll see more 11 personnel next year if we do see that. I think it has to do with what is the talent at receiver and tight end. And in fact, I think you could make a case, a counter argument, that in theory, without context of anything, that without Love and Price, you might be better off doing more 12 personnel in certain situations to get extra blockers because you don't have backs that can just kind of go out there and do crazy things. Then there's also the notion of, but if you spread them out more, Aeneas is more of a downhill one-cut runner, you want to spread him out more, create more creases for him to hit. That's, I would think, where kind of Brandon is going with it, with the backs they have. I think there's a lot of merit to that. But I think ultimately, Brandon, what this is going to come down to is what does the personnel best fit everywhere else? The reason that I could see a scenario where maybe there's more 12 personnel this year is that I think they have better blocking tight ends this year. I think Cooper Flanagan, if he's healthy, and James Flanagan give you a better blocking 1-2 punch than what you got last year from Eli Raridan and Ty Washington. So there are certainly some situations where I'd like to see 12 personnel. And depending on who your other receivers are, it's like, well, then that makes sense. But if I don't have a couple receivers that can hurt you on 2 to 3 man pass patterns, then that might not be great. I could see a scenario where they go 12 personnel and you've got like Micah Gilbert and Quincy Porter on the field, or Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams, or Micah Gilbert and Quincy Porter. I mean, you know what I mean? Or Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter. You want to have some guys can make some plays down the field. You could have, Jordan Faison, depending on how you wanted to do it. So I just think that more so than the running back room is going to determine sort of that 11, 12 personnel balance. I think what you'll hear me advocate less of this year is I won't be out here pushing for a lot of 20 and 21 personnel. Now, knowing how things work in this profession, sometimes it's like, oh, now they start doing a lot of 20 and 21 personnel now that they don't have Love and Price, and I'll lose my mind. But I don't think we'll see that. I think Mike Denbrock likes to have a balance between the two. And I think there's arguments to be made that the blocking from the tight end position could be better next year. And that's ultimately what might determine why we see a little bit more 12 personnel than 11 personnel.
Yeah, we see that the same. From Gideon Rosa, any chance we move Cole Mullins back outside? I get we're loaded there, but I feel like moving him inside was a mistake.
I don't disagree. I think they've had to pump him up to get that weight on. I've never loved the idea of Cole Mullins being an interior player. I would absolutely like to see him lose 10 pounds, streamline a little bit, and bump him back outside. I still think that's his best position, Trev.
Yeah.
So we see that the same way.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. We see that absolutely the same way. Last few here, Trev, before we get out of here today.
For Bobby S., compare CJ and Teddy in terms of athleticism, arm strength, accuracy coming into Notre Dame.
Well, I would say Teddy has the advantage in athleticism and arm strength. CJ has the edge in accuracy. CJ has the edge in just processing, feel for the game. There's a lot of things like that CJ has the edge for, consistency, ball placement. But if you're just strictly, your first two are just about pure physical tools. I would argue that Teddy is the most talented, like just athleticism and arm strength combination probably since Phil Dracovic, and he's a more natural passer than Phil. And I'd say you could maybe even go back to the era where they went in consecutive years, Everett Golson, Gunnar Keel, Malik Zaire, Deshaun Kaiser, Brandon Wimbush in consecutive years. He has that kind of arm talent, like that big time arm talent of just athleticism and arm strength. He doesn't have a lot of the other things that CJ has right now. And that's why I think him getting in a year early could be great for him, because he gets to learn under CJ for a year, where it wasn't a given that in 27 he was going to get a chance to learn under CJ, depending on the kind of year CJ has and the decision he makes after the season. So a lot of the things that CJ's great at, Teddy has to learn. And how well he learns those things is going to determine if he taps into his 5-star upside. So like today, I did my grades of the offense now that Teddy's on board, and did my player rankings. I had Teddy 7th in the class on the offense side of the ball on the current grade, because he's a year younger than everybody else. I'm grading him off junior film. Of course, he's going to be a little bit younger, but his ceiling is as high as anybody in the class outside of, I mean, honestly, with anybody. I mean, his ceiling is on the same level as like Grayson McHugh, Ian Premer, like all Cade Finley, Javion. I mean, the ceiling is enormously high. So how well he learns those other important parts of quarterback play that aren't mentioned here by Bobby S. are going to determine whether he's always that really talented guy that never pans out, like Phil Dracovic, like DeShone Kizer, like some of those guys, or does his elite talent pan out like CJ so far has panned out? And that's like Trevor Lawrence, like guys like that. He's got that kind of upside. He just needs a lot more work to get there, which is expected of a guy who reclassified a year up. So physical tools, certainly very impressive, but I never felt that the physical tools were what made CJ Carr elite as far as just raw tools. His throwing ability is elite, but it's not because he's got an arm that compares to Josh Allen's, you know what I mean? Or the athleticism that compares to, Pat Mahomes, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that, it's the feel for the game that makes him. I mean, you could argue now, Matt Stafford, I watched a little bit of the Rams this year, like highlight. He doesn't have the power he did when he was younger.
No.
He's not the athlete he was when he was young. He's a way better quarterback now, though. And that's because it's why it's here. It's the feel for the game. It's the processing. It's knowing where to go with the football. Yeah. Those are all things that I look at, Trev.
Yeah, absolutely.
CJ.
100%. I mean, those are the intangible tools that set people apart. We had a Tom Brady question last week. It's like Tom Brady when he was in the league, even in his prime, never had the strongest arm in the league. He was not top 5 in terms of athleticism, but his intangible tools made him just borderline unbeatable, man. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I get it.
All right. Here's a good one. I swear, here's a good one from Battle in the Trenches about recruiting pipelines.
Are there any?
Read it, and then I want you to answer first, Trevor, just because I've answered this before. I'm just very curious of your thoughts on this one.
Yeah. Are there any areas you would like to see Notre Dame try to build a recruiting pipeline that doesn't currently get tapped into? Some of the ones on my list, they're getting tapped into. I just would like to see them in more volume, like more of an impact in Texas, a little bit more impact out west, more of an impact in Florida. I think they're doing a pretty good job on the East Coast. I mean, all the highly touted recruits that they've gotten in from the Carolinas the last couple seasons, obviously, like the New England region, they've done a great job with. And then, locally, they're getting offensive linemen from Michigan, Wisconsin, things like that. I think the Chicago market, especially with the upcoming talent of some other players in the 2027 class, guys like Quentin Burrell. I know there's the Parks kid on the defensive line is from the Chicagoland area. So more so than I guess my answer is all the hotbed areas Notre Dame has tapped into recently. It's just more consistency in those areas is what I would personally like to see.
Yeah, I think part of it, Trev, and you kind of got to this, you have to be flexible because talent changes. Yeah. There's years where talent in St. Louis is going to be filled with great players that Notre Dame can recruit. In other years, it's like there's maybe 1 or 2 guys that fit what you're looking for. Same thing in Georgia and Florida. You got to pound the Southeast. You got to pound Texas. You got to go out west, Southwest, Arizona, Southern Cal. I think finding those pockets like you're talking, St. Louis, Chicago, like if there's a big time player in Chicago, you've got to have a great success rate there. Now, it's not going to be where you're going to go 10 for 10 like you used to back in the day. And that's even being hyperbolic because Ohio State and Michigan are going to have success in those areas too. And they're big time powers. But, you've got to be able to clean up in Chicago as best you can. I'd like it if Notre Dame could have a little bit more success in Ohio and Pennsylvania than they have in past years. Now they're starting to get there. I mean, their offensive line class this past year was filled with nothing but Pennsylvania and Michigan kids, basically, with the exception of Charlie Tom, who's a Northeastern kid. Like, that's just kind of where they're going to make their living there. But I think the Mid-Atlantic we've talked about, Virginia on down, but I would love for Notre Dame to start having more success in those Catholic school leagues and private school leagues in DC. Like, and they've had, I mean, they haven't got a lot of guys from there, but the guys they've got from there ended up being pretty good players. DJ Brown was a multi-year starter at Notre Dame. Obviously, Cam Hart had a great career at Notre Dame. Sam Mustipher had a great career at Notre Dame. Some, not all have, but like when they have gotten kids from there, they've done pretty well there. That would be one that they don't currently get. And they used to really clean up in New Jersey, and they don't have quite as much success in Jersey as they used to. And I'd like to see them get back to that a little bit as well. But I mean, when you're Notre Dame and you're the team you are now, you can kind of go wherever you want to get the best players. And I think that's what we're seeing now. They can go into Florida now and get kids in the past they weren't going to get. They can go down to Louisiana and get some kids. They can go to Georgia and get some kids. They can go to Texas and get some kids. They're able to do that. I just think there's certain regions, like you want to be real careful with Mississippi and Alabama kids. We already seen that, right, with Ellis McGaskin. It's just the way those recruitments go. There's just a bigger pool in the SEC than there maybe is in some other areas, where big part of it is because, like in Georgia, where they have success, Georgia's a state that's seen a lot of migration over the years from people in the North as jobs change. I mean, I've pointed this out before. Look at the electoral college numbers in the Northeast and the North in 1984 and compare them to, what we saw in 2024. It shows you that there's very dramatic population shifts in those. And so, like, for example, you look in 1984, the state of Ohio had 24 electoral votes. And that's determined by population, by the way. The state of Michigan had 20. Pennsylvania had 25. Those are areas where Notre Dame obviously had a lot of success. And then you fast forward to 2024, Ohio's down to 17. Illinois was at 24 in 1984. They're down to 19. Michigan is at 20. They're down to 15. Pennsylvania was 25. They're down to 19. Those are dramatic shifts. Where are they going? Well, in 1984, the state of Florida had 21. Now they have 30. The state of Georgia had 12. Now they're at 16. The state of North Carolina had 13. Now they're at 16. The state of Texas had 29. Now they're at 40. So you've seen a migration south as different industries kind of collapse. The steel industry is not what it was. A lot of jobs are kind of important. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons for it. And certain states are more business friendly. So over the course of 10, 20 years, you just start to see these migrations happen. You look at areas around Charlotte that have just really exploded in the last 15, 20 years. So the advantage for Notre Dame by remaining a national program that just gets wherever you can go is you can then adjust as those pockets move. I mean, the North used to dominate football. Why? Same reason the South dominates it now. It's a lot easier to get Northern kids to stay up North. You know what I mean? Think about it. Notre Dame, think about the elite athletes that Notre Dame got in the late 80s and the 1990s. Talking about Rocket Ismail, Ricky Waters, Jerome Bettis, Todd Light. Where were they from? Pennsylvania and Michigan. Todd Light and Jerome Bettis were from Michigan. Ricky Waters and Rocket Ismail from Pennsylvania. Bryant Young, where was he from? Chicago. Well, they had to go get his son from North Carolina. It's a little bit of a different animal. You know what I mean? Like the Flanagans stayed north, they're in Wisconsin, but it's just you have to, this is why being a national program is so advantageous for teams like Notre Dame and Ohio State, where they can recruit across the country. And you even saw Nick Saban do that. Nick Saban was coming up to Ohio, get kids. He was going out west to get kids. Cause look, there's talent everywhere and you got to be able to go get it, but you have to have a core base. And I honestly think Marcus Freeman and staff have done a pretty good job of that. Chicago's the one area, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Jersey. I would like to see, you've got to have a better hit rate for big time players coming out of the regions. I don't want you to lose Quincy Porter to Ohio State out of high school next time. I want you to get him right away, not in a year or two. I want you to be able to get some of these guys coming out of high school as opposed to then getting them later in the process. I think that's where I'd like to see Notre Dame have more success. They're doing a great job in Georgia and Florida and North Carolina and Texas compared to what you expect them to do. If they can now get more of the elite players that come from the North, don't lose Quentin Burrell to Ohio State or Georgia like you lost Taylon Taylor and players of past years. Don't lose Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter to Ohio State. Get at least one of those guys. I think those are areas where I'd like to see Notre Dame. And you see they're trying to do that. They're trying. I mean, this past year was huge. Getting Joey O'Brien and Kari Adams, both Northern kids. That was huge. 3-4 years ago, that doesn't happen. They probably don't get either one of those guys. They go to Penn State and Oregon or Ohio State, something like that. That's a big change. And they still went and got Aiden Pouncey from Florida and Chaz Smith from Tennessee. You know what I mean? Like, they still got those big-time Southern kids, but take away the 2 Northern kids out of this DB class, and what are we talking about with Notre Dame? You know, so, yeah, you got to get them Southern kids in Texas and Southwest, but they've got to start cleaning up on more of the big-time players up north above the Mason-Dixon line, and they're starting to do that, and that's a big difference. I mean, they've gotten guys like Caden Finley before. I mean, getting Jonas Walton and Javian Osborne is essential to this class, but now they're also cleaning up north, too, with some of those guys, and I think that's extremely important to the future of what they're trying to do. And Chicago's the next one. This 27 and 28 is going to be a huge year for Chicago. I mean, Trev, it is loaded on the defensive line. I mean, you've got Cam McGee and Caleb Tucker and Darian Prescott in the 28 class. You've got in the 27 class, you've got Braden Parks. You've got Tavares Harrington. You've got Quentin Burrell, who's a dude at receiver. Like, you've got to get at least 4 of those guys, in my opinion. Like, 3 is the minimum, but you get 4 to 5 to 6 of those guys, you're going to have another highly ranked number 1 class, because those guys aren't just good Northern prospects, Trev. They're elite national prospects. I mean, I'm just going to kind of give you guys a little bit of a sense of that. So I've talked about Cam McGee, Caleb Tucker, Darian Prescott. I'm just going to pull them up here real quick and give you their numbers, and then Quentin Burrell, just to give you guys a sense of it. They're all Chicago area kids. Let's see here. So if you look at Quentin Burrell, 27 kid, he is a consensus top 100 player. He's number 41 by On3 Rivals, number 42 by ESPN. Shocker, 247 has him way lower. Cam McGee is ranked as the number 8 and 15 player in the country by Rivals On3 and 247. Caleb Tucker is ranked as the number 29 player in the country. Oh, we got to go down south and get those 350-pounders. There's a kid who's 6'5", 350 in Chicago in the 28 class. Caleb Tucker. Top 50 national player. Go get him. You know what I mean? And hopefully that Darian Prescott, another guy I'm super high on. He's the number 16 overall ranked player in the country. Another 6'4", 210-pound edge kid. If you clean up in Chicago, you don't have to go down south to get linemen and receivers. You can get those guys. And so I think that's an area where I really feel like he has there's a lot of those northern type of kids that are starting to come around more, and you've got to have some success you've got to have great success with them. And it's tough because, I mean, the last 3 national titles have been right next to you, Indiana, Ohio State, and Michigan. It makes it harder, but that's where Marcus Freeman's going to have to clean up. And I love the fact that when they went out on the road this year, the first place they went to was Chicago. That was brilliant. Like, I want to see that again. When the dead period's over, go back to Chicago, because it's an incredibly important year. But you also can't ignore the other areas you've done a great job of. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Yeah, and there's talented kids all over, but you get what I'm saying, Trev? Like that, that's why you have to be national. You got to clean up north more, but you can't then take away from what you're doing in other places. Sometimes you got to move away. Notre Dame doesn't recruit California like they used to. And honestly, it's smart. California kids are different, except for a certain type, and they are getting those guys, the Madden Faramos, the Kings of Iliama Asas. There are some California kids, but now they're more picky with California kids. They're not just loading up like they used to in California. It's a little harder to recruit California too. Oregon's tough to beat out there. USC, obviously. Texas is a place where they're having a lot more success. There's better cultural fits. There's better, kids more willing to leave the West Coast or the South, their region in Texas. It's just an area where Notre Dame's had a lot of success recently. Keep that up. But you can't just recruit one. You got to recruit them all. But I think the next couple of years, the North is an area that I think that Notre Dame absolutely has to crush it up north. If they can do that, I think you're going to see them have another top 2 to 3 class, if not another number 1 class. And that could be a lot of fun. A lot of fun to watch. So,
without a doubt.
I think that'll do it for us today, Trev.
Well, good deal. Well, folks, have a fun and safe weekend. That's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. On your way out of here, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Make sure you are a premium message board subscriber. That board's at irishbreakdown.com. We're going to be back on Monday for the buy-sell hold. So I believe that thread's going to go up at some point over the weekend. Be sure to get your submissions in. But until next time, that is Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.